and I'm your host, Radhika. Well, India has been a hub for technological innovation with a large youth population, deeper internet penetration, as well as government initiatives such as Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, and Atmanirbhar Bharat. These factors have set the stage for India to become a major player in the Web3 market. And according to a NASSCOM report, Web3 investments in India have grown 37-fold from the beginning of 2020 to Q1 2022. And it is projected that $1.1 trillion in Web3 economic value will be added to India's GDP by 2032. The adoption of technology like blockchain has the potential to drive growth in key areas of the Indian economy such as agriculture, healthcare, public distribution systems, and education. By leveraging blockchain, India can strengthen these foundational pillars of the economy and realize its goal of becoming a $5 trillion economy. So to tell you more on that and get the ball rolling for the day, I will request Manisha Gupta, Group Commodities Editor, Network 18, to welcome our esteemed guest. But before that, I may request a short video of CoinDCX Change Starts Together.
Products and NFTs are unregulated and can be highly risky. There may be no regulatory recourse for any loss from such transactions. Here's the thing about change. It's always happening. Mere fragments of time chipping away little by little at reality as we know it. Until, when we least expect, change does what it does best. It arrives. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves on the cusp of taking our next big leap. A whole new world entirely at our fingertips. Only this time, more open, more equal, more inclusive, and more fair. With the power to liberate in your hands and the responsibility to uphold its vision in ours, we are CoinDCX, catalysts of change in a new digital world. Founded in 2018, we are India's leading crypto exchange. Trusted by over 1.3 crore users, supported by many top investors, and the hard work of more than 600 employees. Our efforts ensure equal access to a plethora of revolutionary new digital pursuits and enable interactions with an all-new decentralized digital world. Our products are safe, secure, and compliant. We also support many promising new ventures that help strengthen the broader digital ecosystem. And for those who seek it, we offer a comprehensive crypto education platform. A decentralized new digital world is upon us. Change is upon us. The only question is, are we willing to embrace it? CoinDCX. Change starts together. Crypto products and NFTs are unregulated and can be highly risky. They may be
Hello everybody and a very warm welcome to Namaste Web3 CoinDCX and Forbes Education Initiative. We are very excited to have you here as a part of this initiative which aims to educate and inform about the latest developments and trends in the Web3 space. As the world of Web3 is constantly evolving, it can be difficult sometimes to keep up with the latest developments and understand the implications of these technologies. Our goal is to bridge this gap and provide valuable insights and information to the masses. With the help of CoinDCX's industry expertise and Forbes' reputation for producing high-quality content, we are confident that we can make the world of Web3 and crypto more accessible and understandable for all. Well, Web 1.0, the internet in its early days, was essentially a medium for the exchange of text-based information. And then came Web 2, which brought change in different things by introducing different forms of media and making the internet easy to use. With Web3, the focus is on giving the power in the hands of user, providing greater transparency and leveling the playing field in the truest sense. And it's for this reason that Web3 has already seen so many supporters and cheerleaders despite being a relatively new technology. When it comes to technology, India has always been at the forefront, especially in terms of innovating with technology, and for this very reason, the Indian blockchain and Web3 space have already achieved an edge over other countries. We are seeing a steady increase in investment flows, a proliferation of startups, and diverse pool of tech talent emerging. We are confident that India has the right ingredients to lead the Web3 revolution. Namaste Web3 is our attempt to contribute in shaping the future of the internet and make India Web3 ready. To begin with, Namaste Web3 will touch upon 10 cities and will deliberate on trends in Web3, including decentralization or DeFi or non-fungible tokens or NFTs and other emerging use cases as well. Namaste Web3 will bring industry leaders, entrepreneurs and investors and discover new projects and ideas that are shaping the future of the decentralized web. The world of Web3 and crypto can be complex, so our objective is to simplify it as much as possible and to make it accessible to a wider audience. So do join in this initiative and help us make India Web3 ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha. We really look forward to this evening now. It is indeed a moment of pride to be partnering with Namaste Web3, an initiative that has been designed to connect with the Indian Web3 community, raise awareness amongst the masses, and also showcase the many benefits it can bring to businesses, individuals, and also society as a whole. Now, to talk more on this, may I please welcome our distinguished guest, Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, to deliver the keynote address. Dr. Abhishek Singhvi's multifaceted and versatile personality straddles public life, media, law, and academia. Known as the ultimate multitasker, he manages these diverse areas with excellence, commitment, and sincerity, and is rated amongst the top in each. He is also a senior 3-term sitting MP. He currently chairs the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce, and as far as back 2011, he also chaired the Standing Committee on Law and Justice. And in 2022, he also briefly chaired the significant Parliamentary Standing Committee on Home. Recently, 2022, he was elevated to the Congress Supreme Decision-Making Body. He is also an eminent jurist and a front-ranking senior counsel of the Supreme Court. Dr. Singhvi is also a well-known author and columnist and a visible media partner. He is the senior most serving national spokesperson of the Congress Party and a former vice president of the Supreme Court Bar Association. He is also chair of advisory board of Department of Law, Human Rights and RTI of the Congress Party Committee. Wow. Now that's an impressive introduction, Dr. Singhvi. We are so delighted to have you here today amongst us. Please put your hands together for Dr. Abhishek Singhvi.
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you, Manisha. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a very warm and an exaggeratedly flattering introduction, which I am sure I don't deserve. Friends, the advantage of speaking on such occasions is that at least temporarily one can prove that even old horses like me can learn new tricks, can learn new jargon, technology, and pretend to be young with those who truly represent a generation gap. But I always get inspiration from the soaring words of Alvin Toffler, who said, especially relevant for avant-garde technology like Web3, he said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn and relearn. And I think that learning, unlearning and relearning is the core part of the process which each of us has to engage in. Friends, I stand here not as chair of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce, but as one of a growing tribe of fellow Web3 enthusiasts who believe Web3 can well be one of the biggest factors in bringing to fruition India's dream of becoming a $5 trillion economy. It's quite astonishing when we see that the Web3 revolution started only about 14 odd years ago, when blockchain burst onto the global finance scene. A lady, Abigail Johnson, was almost prophetic in saying, and I quote, she said, blockchain technology isn't just a more efficient way to settle securities. It will fundamentally change market structures and maybe even the architecture of the internet itself, unquote. Blockchain remains at the core of Web3, since the latter is a blockchain-powered decentralized web that distributes power equally amongst people and amongst leaders. Web3 envisions empowering its users in terms of controlling privacy, data and ownership. It is a reaction to the centralized domination of a handful of technology giants in cyberspace. Currently, netizens on the one hand lack choice and control over how they trade personal data, while upstarts struggle to break into markets where dominant players control user access and experience. As another famous startup founder, Tim O'Reilly, said, he said, Web 3.0 will be a web of trust, where individuals will have control of their own data and where artificial intelligence will create new forms of intelligence. This decentralized database is transparent and immutable. Providing encrypted wallets to protect privacy, Web3 gives equal access to participation and is censorship resistant, eliminating the need for intermediaries. One of the Ethereum co-founders put it pithily when he said, Web3 is the decentralized web where the power will shift from centralized platforms to individuals, creating a more equitable and a more open internet. Web3 in particular is uniquely aligned to India synergies. It gets a boost from, and in turn it boosts one of India's strongest assets, our tech talent. It synergizes multiple existing initiatives, be it Digital India, Startup India, etc. India already stands upon a solid foundation, being the third largest ecosystem globally, with the highest natively digital population in the world, the largest youth population of any country, and with the most technologically savvy citizens. A developer base of approximately 2.8, just under 3 million 2 years ago. It is also projected to have the most developers by 2023. Statistics can be misleading. There are all kinds of jokes about statistics, but not when diverse statistical sources point in the same direction. NASSCOM's 2022 report, FICCI and EY, the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, and so many more. They all underline the potential for India's Web3 ecosystem to add a staggering 1.1 trillion as addition by 2032. By the end of the decade, blockchain would be used as a foundational technology for 30% of the global customer base and would reach, even by that date, a value of approximately 3.1 trillion. We must remember that the growth story of Web3 has had its own vicissitudes. From its exponential growth between 2015 to 17, after the Ethereum launch, and then the choppy times of 2018 to 20, including the infamous RBI ban on financial services firms, Web3 has shown resilience. As the lady mentioned just now, Web3 investments in India multiplied 37 times between early 2020 and early 2022, despite the choppy waters immediately prior to that. After the Supreme Court lifted the RBI ban issue, an increasing number of retail and institutional investors got into this space. 2021 alone had over 70 active institutional investors. The total number of Web3 startups in India by 2022 was over 450. They're only Web3 startups. They'd raised more than $1.3 billion since 2020. India ranks third in the world by Web3 workforce size, employing a little dated, already quite high, about 75,000 blockchain professionals. And this Web3 workforce in India is hiking up at the rate of 100 to 120% year on year. As I said, Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, Atmanirbhar India, all of these are helping this growth. The digital economy in India grew at 2.4 times faster rate than the Indian economy itself for the 5-year period 2014 to 19. Despite all this, we may still happily be only scratching the surface. Educational initiatives like Namaste Web3, going from city to city, calling out to the individual Web3 and tech enthusiasts to join a growing community of Indian Web3 innovators, entrepreneurs and leaders from sectors ranging from finance to lawmaking to technology, can go a long way in enlightening the common man as to how blockchain-based finance can be beneficial. We now have a very impressive list where Web3 can be a game changer. Different fields, different sectors. Healthcare, education, land registrations, taxation, digital payments, data management, supply chain traceability, climate change issues. It can leverage technology in mitigating numerous legal issues, smart contracts, especially land registries coming up for a lot of scrutiny, intellectual property rights, chain of custody, settlements, financial transactions, etc., in all of which the absence of intermediaries and minimization of human error plays an immense role. In agriculture, for example, farmers can reach out directly to consumers without going through middlemen and losing profits. In healthcare, for example, all patient records and prescriptions can be put on a shared blockchain between organizations in the industry for better transparency and quick references. In education, for example, student track records and certificates can be shared. In the public distribution system, management of supply of food grains to the correct beneficiaries with acute traceability and transparency, and so on and so forth. The list is long and impressive. With the trade ecosystem becoming increasingly digitized, something which our parliamentary committee looks at more particularly, the emergence of Trade 4.0 requires government agencies to adapt their roles across the 3 trade pillars as facilitators, as enforcers and as negotiators. As enforcers, they uphold laws and protect national and economic security and work to ensure that global supply chains are safe, secure, legitimate and fair. As a negotiator, governments formulate trade agreements, resolve trade-related disputes and represent their economy's best interests in front of global trade forums. As facilitators, they leverage Trade 4.0 for the collective good, for a cleaner, safer, equitable, modern economy, leading to a more connected, coherent, clean and capable global trade ecosystem. Friends, with over 500 million internet users and growing, India is clearly one of the largest, fastest growing digital consumer markets. Though of course, business adoption continues to be uneven. Usual many Indias in one syndrome exists here as also. The sectors that require the most attention include e-commerce, digital media, digital advertising, fintech, smart home, app development, digital health, e-services, mobility services, devices, data centers, software, IT services, public cloud and consumer electronics. But friends, digital growth without digital infrastructure is both a contradiction and a chimera. Digital infrastructure needs vitally, urgently and comprehensively, it needs investments estimated to be about $23 to $25 million billion dollars as in B by 2025 to support the growing demand of digital services and rising online traffic. Tower companies are transforming themselves to digital infrastructure companies. They need an investment of almost 20 billion over the next 3 to 5 years. It's good to have starry-eyed optimism, but starry-eyed optimism must not ignore the challenges to India's Web3 growth story and the imperative need for measures to first recognize them, address them, and then address them and overcome them. The first and the most serious gap in this regard is the absence of regulatory clarity and of a comprehensive regulatory framework coupled with ambiguity in policy which we find every day. It leads to lack of confidence in founders, innovators and investors. It is already culminating, and this is one of the very serious challenges, already culminating in undesirable migration of Web3 enthusiasts to greener pastures, to countries that provide a supportive regulatory environment and is resulting in the drain of very, very, very precious talent and capital from India. This must be decelerated and ultimately eliminated. It is time we emulated economies like the US, the European Union, Singapore and some others and adopted paradigms there which are not the end result, they are not the end all and be all, but they are a very good starting point. In India, there is a complete gap. In the US, you have the Responsible Financial Innovation Act, called RIFA, of 2021. In the EU, you have Markets in Crypto Assets Act, 2020. In Singapore, you have Payment Services Amendment Act of 2021. There is no reason why India should not attempt an eclectic mix of these paradigms, now globally emerging, and in the creation of these legal frameworks, we must ensure that local regulatory framework syncs with the global framework. Because this is truly Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. There is no national boundary for this kind of subject. The second major challenge is the absence of institutional upskilling resources and centers. Prevalence of limited academic coursework in our country leads to diminished focus on blockchain technology, and that is considerably exacerbated by the lack of proper upskilling resources and centers. Current tech talent is predominantly aligned to Web2 application, giving rise to a wide gap in demand and supply in blockchain talent. Absence of institutional resources to deal with the demands of upskilling and the absorption of talent in the Web3 industry would be a great hindrance to the growth story. Despite having a sizable talent pool, the country cannot leverage it for optimum use in the Web3 industry in the absence of a dedicated institutional curriculum and educational development. A World Economic Forum report showed that investment in upskilling could potentially boost the global economy by US dollars 6.5 trillion by 2030, and in India's economy alone by US dollars 500+ billion. This requires active partnership between government, between industry, government and academia. And that is the need of the hour, to address the issue of skill gap, of talent absorption. Funding has to be prioritized for upskilling in niche technology, and educational institutions and technological enterprises need to create learning platforms. Public funds have to be invested in intensive R&D of blockchain technology. Development of dedicated Web3 certificate courses, curricula which are focused on this are indispensable. The shortage of digital talent in India is leading to high attrition rates and increased wages. As a Salesforce study, 14 G20 countries have been found in that study to have missed out on about $11.5 trillion worth of cumulative growth if the skill gap or the upskilling gap requirements are not addressed soon. The third challenge, friends, is the absence of awareness of the benefits of Web3. And that is why, in particular, initiatives like today have their own relevance, although they are too far few and too far between. The manifold benefits of the blockchain technology in myriad spheres still suffers from an awareness deficit about the Web3 effects on the growth of industry. Concerted efforts by the stakeholders could play a significant role to promote the emerging technology and spread awareness about advantages to the end user. Negative focus on cryptocurrency, which has been a bit obsessive in the earlier years, in this country has affected the perception about Web3 and its usage. The blockchain narrative needs a paradigm shift from the crypto to the transformative changes that can be brought about with the application of Web3. In a nutshell, friends, there is here a great opportunity for India in moving from Industry 4.0 and Trade 4.0 to full Web3 based trade. For this, first, incentivize investments in technology. Second, encourage R&D. Third, enhance human capital. Fourth, increase institutional capacity. And finally, provide a social security net. These 5 variables, friends, if effectively applied, will hasten India's tryst with this technological destiny and future. We now realize how prescient and correct was one of the co-founders of Ethereum, Buterin, when he said, quote, "Whereas most technologies tend to automate workers on the periphery doing menial tasks, blockchains automate away at the center. Instead of putting the taxi driver out of a job, blockchain puts Uber out of a job and lets the taxi driver work with the customer directly." Unquote. The object is not to put Uber out of a job, but it just tells you the efficacious nature of blockchain technology if applied correctly. Well, friends, as I end, there is no doubt that there are still many miles to walk and many peaks to conquer. There are many apprehensions and trepidations, some valid, some imaginary, sometimes exaggerated by doubting Thomases, and sometimes distorted by rogues and fraudsters. In this ambience, it is good to remember, as they say, that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Maybe this is the next big treasure waiting to be tapped by the Indian economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singhvi. Let's have a huge round of applause for him. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment to thank the audience of Delhi who have continuously shown their enthusiasm towards the new age of the internet. Today, here at Namaste Web3 Delhi chapter, we have an incredible lineup of panelists and presenters who are going to deliberate and share their views on the $5 trillion Indian economy. Is Web3 India's next big thing? Now, without much ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Sumit Gupta, CEO CoinDCX, to share his thoughts on how India is poised to be the global hub for Web3. Let's have a huge round of applause for Mr. Sumit.
Namaste Delhi. Thank you, Dr. Singhvi, for the wonderful stats. While I was listening to it, it gave me goosebumps. And I remember my early days of CoinDCX when I was hearing some of the similar stats and used to get excited about the immense potential of the overall industry. And it was very refreshing to hear that again from someone like you. And thank you everyone who is present here and coming here on weekend to be a part of this event, to be a part of this initiative, Namaste Web3. We are all very excited to have you, and it's always very refreshing, and the vibe in such events is always very energetic. Sometimes I feel old when you meet fellow entrepreneurs who are building in this space, because I've also seen like people who are fresh out of college building in this space, and that gives you how much potential India has to build in Web3. And like it was mentioned, like today I'm going to share little perspective on the overall industry from a mindset of a builder, someone who has been a part of this space from last 6 to 7 years, running CoinDCX from last 5 years, and we'll share some of the points around that. I had a presentation, I don't know, it's not coming up in the screen, but so I'll just continue to share my thoughts. So I think right now we are in a inflection point of the industry where the decisions that we take now, right, are going to decide the next decade. I genuinely believe that, okay, so there is 5-6 years back I met a VC, and a very famous VC, he told me, Sumit, if you want to know the future of technology and where it's headed to, just see where the brightest minds in the world, where they are working. And then I started my research, and 5 years, 6 years back, when I was talking to a lot of founders and VCs, I saw that there are so many people, right, some of the smartest minds who are working on blockchain technology, who are working on building Web3 solutions. That essentially is happening globally. In fact, in the last couple of years, I have seen insane amount of activity happening in the Web3 space in India as well. Yeah, so this, the chart on the right is something that is very close to my heart, because that just keeps builders like me and 1,000 other builders excited about the potential of this space. Though many of you might feel, if you are linking it with price, that it's a bear market, and but it's never a bear market, it's always a building market, right? You always keep on building stuff. And if you look at the stats from NASSCOM, there is so much activity that has happened in India in the last couple of years. So many startups coming in the space by Indians, right, in India as well as globally. I think that's very impressive to see. I have personally not seen this much activity happening in India, right, in the last 7 years that I've seen in the last 2 years alone, right. It's very motivating to see so much shift in the mindset of people when it comes to building and innovating in a disruptive space and technology like Web3. And that's actually happening. Indication of that could be that India already has so many unicorns in Web3 in spite of a clear regulatory framework, right? There are 11% of global Web3 workforce is in India. Just like, just by in the last few years, right, without even a regulatory framework, 11% is a lot. And what is more impressive is the rate at which it is increasing. We are seeing a growth rate of around 100 to 120% every year when it comes to this workforce. And I am a strong believer right? And I hope that in the coming years, in the next decade, India is going to be a clear global hub for Web3, and this is what is the dream that a lot of Web3 enthusiasts see and aspire to achieve at some point. I think with support from all of you who are present here today, we will see that becoming true. And like mentioned in the graph on the right, we might, if we zoom out and if we start connecting the dots that Dr. Singhvi mentioned about the stats and data points, we'll know where the world is headed. The world is getting digital, and you have to, like that's where it's going. So it's important that India leverages the benefits of it and becomes a global Web3 hub. Now, if you look at some more stats, 15 to 16% of India's GDP is coming from internet companies, right? Consumer internet companies. That's a lot, and a lot of that progress happened in the last decade alone. There was another stat where when the internet was new, right? Or if you look at the last 15-20 years, the moment US started embracing, and there are a lot of companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, right? Because of companies like that who build the internet, and we use and interact with a lot of those companies on a day-to-day basis. They took the advantage of that, and because of that leverage, the GDP growth was sevenfold, 7 times than how the growth rate was in terms of other industries and the overall GDP growth rate of the country. And that is the power of leveraging technology. India is in a very, very beautiful spot to capture $1.1 trillion of new economic value, and this is a big contributor to the nation's dream of becoming a $5 trillion economy. And this is a report by NASSCOM that came up in later part of 2022. $1.1 trillion is a lot, right? There was a report which mentioned that by 2030, there will be $5 trillion of economic value that India can capture. And if you read more about it, right, about the evolution of internet, we will start believing that Web3 is the evolution of internet. And a lot of that value can be captured by India, provided we embrace it and we support the technology by the right regulations. And this $1.1 trillion, right, is going to give rise to so many new jobs. In US, it's 7 million jobs, that they've generated by leveraging internet. In India is in a very, very beautiful spot in terms of leveraging it rightly, and I don't think any other country in the world is in such a great position as India is to capture these benefits, because we have so many developers. We have more than 5 million developers, right, who can contribute to building of this new internet, and we must leverage it. Now, this is one point we discussed about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Now, what is interesting is the the owning part of it, right? And there's a confusion that blockchain is good, Web 3 is good. Why do we need crypto? So I just want to spend 1 minute talking about that. Essentially, when we talk about owning the internet, right? The tokens, right, are a representation of that ownership. Now, that can be of multiple types. I'm not talking about tokens as an investment or just multiplying that you invest some amount and multiply against. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that tokens fundamentally are a representative of the value of the value that you can capture with Web3. There was a book which mentioned that there is a problem that humanity is trying to solve right from its inception. How do we transfer economic value? I repeat, how do we transfer economic value over time and space? What does that mean is that since we all came into existence, we have been always struggling to find ways on how we can transfer value. We started with barter system where people used to transfer value with barter, and then it evolved, and right now we are all transacting digitally. And lot of things have changed in the process, right, in this evolution. And blockchain is a technology, right, which solves that, which solves how do you transfer value over the internet, because internet right now has solved for transfer of information. Any information that is present anywhere, you can just get it in a matter of minutes or hours from any point to any other point, right? So internet has solved for that. That has solved for transfer of information, but internet has not yet solved for transfer of value. That is still not solved, and there are a lot of challenges. But blockchain is a technology which actually helps you solve that. And when you solve that problem, it just opens up so many possibilities, so many new business models, right? Even our current financial, the way current financial system operates. Yesterday you might be reading about the Silicon Valley Bank, what happened. Now, whatever happened with Silicon Valley Bank, in a matter of hours, we got to know that information. We don't have to rely on news, or we don't have to rely on a print medium to get to know that information. So internet has solved for that. But there are still a lot of problems that are currently not solved. And fundamentally, blockchain can solve a lot of those values, whether it is how to build robust financial systems or how to build governance, which is more citizen-centric, which gives all of us here a control over their data, privacy, identity. I think that is something which has not solved yet. Even today, I am maintaining my Twitter profile from last 12 years. If Twitter goes down, I will not be able to transport my entire data to a new social media platform. It all goes down with Twitter. But blockchain allows you to transport all of that information in a matter of click. Essentially, you own your data, you own your identity, you own every piece of information. And that's something that a lot of these tech giants monetize on. I think this is what Web3 is all about. It's a set of, it's a new technology stack which is building this new internet. And that is going to give rise to so many new opportunities, so many business models. And I strongly believe that India is in the best spot to capture that. Look at the audience in the room, right? So many enthusiasts are there, and this is just Delhi. We are doing this event in different cities of the country. We have done one in Bangalore. There's so many developers. If you look at the passion that they have in terms of building an Web3, that's mind-boggling. It just makes you feel that there's so much potential India has, and we must leverage it. When internet was new, why is Amazon, Facebook, Google not from India? But when we are building this future of internet, it's really important that India builds these next set of companies, Web3 companies, because we have all the ingredients that is required to be a global Web3 leader. And that's something that we see India doing in the next decade, and all the indicators, all the data points hint in that direction. There is one thing that's missing for us to realize that vision, and that is regulations. I think it has been talked about a lot by different people and different forums. If you ask me, as a builder, as an entrepreneur who is building in the industry, I am a strong proponent of regulations. I want regulations, right? Because it's very difficult to build in this space in such an uncertain environment. It's been 5 years. We have been solving a lot of challenges, let alone building a product. Building a product is not even one of the biggest challenges that we have. We can build it. I think there's so many challenges that has to be solved for us to realize that vision of India becoming a global Web3 hub. And regulations is one of them. And regulations is important because it helps protect customers. Not everything, like whenever a new technology comes, right, there are a lot of benefits, but it also has some of the concerns. Even when internet was new, there are a lot of challenges when internet was new. Even in Web3, there are a lot of challenges, concerns that we all need to collectively address. Customer protection being one of them. Making sure there are no illicit activities that happens is another one. And there are so many that's written on the right hand side. If you see, we all need to solve all of that by ensuring that innovation doesn't get hindered. And a right regulatory framework, an open regulatory framework which promotes innovation and also ensures that we don't let bad actors be a part of this ecosystem is something which is very important. And the way to solve that is by an open principle-based regulatory framework, and that's something that we at CoinDCX and all the other players, including Bharat Web3 Association, which is the industry association, everyone is working towards that. How can we create a progressive regulatory framework which will enable India to be a true global Web3 leader? This is one very interesting update that has happened in the recent times. India is having G20 presidency, and crypto regulations is one important charter there. There's been a lot of updates that you might be hearing. We fundamentally believe that this is a very, very important platform to make sure that there's a level playing field, and there's an opportunity to learn from what other countries are doing, share expertise, share knowledge, and the thought of having a global consensus is something that I personally believe is in the right direction. We need to have global consensus. It's a borderless asset class. It's a technology where if these bases are sorted, that India definitely has a very strong edge compared to any other country in the world, and a global aligned regulatory framework is something that will put India in a bright spot and will make India a true tech superpower. Now, the last thought here is that we've been running CoinDCX from last 5 years. It was a very interesting journey, very challenging, very fruitful, very exciting. We have learned a lot as an entrepreneur. We have learned a lot about what are the benefits of this space, and a lot of that has already been covered, and other people in the panel will cover it. You can't stop a technology whose time has come, right? It's a very cliche, but I've started feeling it in the last 5 years a lot more. And Web3 is a technology which is happening. The world is going digital, you can't deny that. And the internet has so much potential, right? And there's so many things that you can do on top of internet, leveraging blockchain. That's a change that we all need to embrace it, and this change is happening. All of us are together in this forum. We want to build a better internet which is fair, inclusive, open, transparent, where anything that happens or where whatever we do on top of internet, it should not be owned by some tech giants who control what we do on internet. It should be in the hands of people. We should, we should have control over that, and that's something that gets us excited every day. That's what keeps us running every day, and we are very excited to build the future of internet here in India together with all of you. And like, this is a very powerful feeling. Like, we all, if you talk to anyone in CoinDCX, this change starts together. It's a decentralized world that we are building, and it cannot be done by CoinDCX alone. It has to have support from policymakers. It has to have support from community, from people like you, and this change has to happen together. Thank you so much for coming here and being a part of this event and initiative. And now I would like to introduce Dilip Chinoy, who is the chairman of Bharat Web3 Association, and a brief about Mr. Dilip. With over 40 years of experience, Dilip has a broad and extensive experience in leading domestic industry bodies. As a veteran in this space, he has been deeply involved in the policy domain and in creating an ecosystem for the skill development. Give a huge round of applause for Mr. Dilip Chinoy. Please come to the stage.
So good evening, and I'd like to begin by thanking Sumit for that brief and short introduction. Thank you for not going and introducing me like Abhishek Singhvi was introduced, so it's a good thing. I'd like to thank Forbes and CoinDCX for providing the Bharat Web3 Association an opportunity to partner in this Namaste Web3 set of programs around the country. So you've heard a lot of statistics, and unfortunately I'm going to bore you with some more statistics going forward. But what I'll do in the 10 minutes or so is first just give you a rough idea of, really reiterate some of the facts on Web3, talk about some global trends, talk about investments in India, then focus and deep dive into the startups that are there, and end with one slider on the Bharat Web3 Association, with the really, one purpose, that those of you in the room who are not yet members, please join and please strengthen the voice of the Web3 ecosystem. So if I look at, okay, great. So everyone has talked about the Web3 ecosystem, but fundamentally, as people, whether it's Radhika, Manisha, or Abhishek, or Sumit, talked about the transparency and data ownership, the uninterrupted services, but one aspect which I really want to highlight is that this whole ecosystem provides security and encryption, and is one of the big answers to this whole cyber security and other aspects that we are dealing with in the Web 2 world. Also, it talks about enhanced capabilities. So if you talk about the whole ecosystem, as you see here, there is a kind of lot of use cases, as you saw in insurance, automobile, healthcare, banking, and payments, etc. And of course, the government, which Dr. Singhvi talked about, land records, or whether it's healthcare. And if you look at the whole system, and this data is going to be repeated, the 30 billion VC funding, which is here, that means the venture capitalist sector has got immense trust and faith in this sector. There's been a 15x growth in VC funding for crypto and other things since 2015. And very interestingly, the rate of growth of VC investing is maybe doubling, because already 14.5 billion of VC has been received just in Q1 of 2022. Of course, the top 10 VCs are responsible for about 60% of the investment, as we see here. If you look at some of the defining trends in this whole ecosystem, some of this was covered by Dr. Singhvi, especially if you look at even the, despite the meltdown that he talked about, despite the, the problems that happened in certain exchanges, you're seeing some kind of stability there. Fundamentals are still resilient despite the downturn, and you are seeing the rise of distributed finance, game, and metaverse happening actually here. What you're seeing very interestingly in 2021, there were a lot of actual 50 billion in NFTs volume for 2021, and an increase in the total value in the DeFi distributed finance sector. I think what we need to also look at here is that corporates and individuals are finding many use cases for Web3 in what is commonly known, and if you've not actually seen it, companies are actually owning and purchasing digital property. Now, one interesting facet is, while physical land and physical ownership could be limited, digital space and digital ownership could be unlimited, or much more X times than the physical aspect of land. Interestingly, it's the developing countries, which are emerging markets like Latin America, APAC, and including India, Nigeria, Vietnam, which are leading adapters. Like India, if, I don't know, many of you may not remember, but if you looked at the early 90s, our telecom penetration was point something, and rural was 0.0 something. And in came the mobile revolution, and we just transformed the actual availability of phone and the way people use phones. I think we are in a similar situation now, where we can transform the lives of ordinary Indians, the potential for India, by using and developing applications in Web3. Of course, the FTX story everybody knows, but I think that has led to some of what Sumit talked about, how exchanges are becoming, much more safer places and building trust. This number has been talked about a lot of times, 450 startups, whether it's the growth of 57%. But what is interesting is that this is actually happening while 80% are in the metros. the 20% of the others are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. And these cities like Jaipur, Vadodara, Ahmedabad, Kolkata are emerging as Web3 developing hubs. Also, this number of 75,000 skilled workers and 70% of active institutional investors was talked about by both Abhishek Singhvi and of course Radhika when she introduced the whole Namaste India concept. I think what is important for us to understand is that the startups are building use cases in different industries. We have talked about finances, entertainment, infrastructure, decentralized communities, or whether it is in AI, ML, augmented reality or virtual reality, big data and analytics, and of course the IoT space. He talked about some examples, but if you take the land records in Telangana or you take the caste records in Maharashtra, there are a lot of examples which can actually happen to benefit the common man in a kind of decentralized and very interesting manner. If you look at the startups, I think 25% are actually focusing on IoT and blockchain integration to capture machine data and data from smart contact-based machines and machine-to-machine connections. This is another area, and Anna Roy, who's sitting in the audience, has been working in the regulatory space. Machine-to-machine communication was the first regulatory aspect which actually came out of the whole government. There are 50+ startups that are focused on AR, VR, enhanced blockchain solutions. So it's a diverse kind of system. If you look at some of the defining trends in the area of the Indian video system, of course, the two aspects. One was the budget 2022, which levied, transaction tax and TDS on the activities or on the local exchanges, and of course this resulted, as Dr. Singhvi said, he didn't use the words, he was a little more diplomatic, but I think a lot of Indian users shifted to foreign platforms, and more recently we have actually strengthened the compliance in India by putting it under the PMLA Act, which is very fresh off the anvil. What has also happened is that there is FDI and funding still continues. I think you have 1.3 billion which has flowed into the India virtual digital assets business. You also looking at different exchanges that have been support local businesses like CoinDCX, which is here. But unfortunately, I think a lot of the young people like Sumit, and Sumit was didn't actually mention it, but a lot of people and talent from India is relocating and setting up abroad. And how do we actually retain this talent here? Example like Polygon is also very interesting. Now, I talked about the Maharashtra government case and of course the Telangana issue here, but even the banks are working on blockchain finance solutions, and of course you have the IPL which is also looking at NFTs. You have Indian companies working at NFTs. I think this is a big area that we need to work with, because we lost out on, let's say, the comic revolution. We lost out on developing big entertainment brands like Marvel, from India. And we should not lose out in this whole digital equivalence of space through not promoting and really accelerating the NFT ecosystem in India. You heard a lot of these statements, but I think what is interesting to know that we could be 10% of GDP by 2025. You heard the 11% of the world Web3 talent here. But what is interesting is that we should have been 11% of the world Web3 market. We are not. We're not even projecting to be that, because we are all taking business as usual. So we need to look at business as unusual, and the regulatory ecosystem, the three challenges that Dr. Singhvi talked about, and the 5 solutions that he actually mentioned are important areas to develop India's potential in the Web3 space. I think what the Bharat Web3 Association is doing is really to getting all the stakeholders here together to make it business as unusual. Normally consultants have 3 things, business as usual, optimistic scenario and pessimistic scenario. I think as an association we are trying to push ourselves to look at an optimistic scenario and actually exceed the whatever standards of 1.1 trillion by 2032 or whatever it is going forward. And these are the companies that are supporting the Web3 Association. A big thank you to them. And if your logo is not on the screen, please do connect with us, because we want to help you grow and actually accelerate your growth and address your issues in talent or regulation or in taxation going forward. Once again, I want to thank Forbes and CoinDCX for this opportunity, and also an opportunity for the Bharat Web3 Association to partner. And thank you all for spending a Saturday evening with us. And we look forward to your presentations and your participation in the other Namaste Web events, and in actually creating an ecosystem where India emerges as a leader in Web3, and we don't miss the bus like we did in Web 1 or Web 2. But we all, a few years from now, will say that 2023 was a defining moment for India in the Web3 space, and India taking a leadership role in the Web3 space based on entrepreneurs such as you sitting in the audience. So again, thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chinoy, for the detailed presentation. Well, change starts together, and that's exactly why we've all gathered here this evening. Now, moving on, it's time for our first panel discussion, and we'll be discussing Web3, the $1 trillion opportunity. Our distinguished panel will discuss the potential for Web3 and its contribution to India's economic growth. The discussion will focus on the opportunities presented by Web3 and how India can capitalize on them to achieve the $1.1 trillion growth projection outlined by various reports. The panel will delve into the challenges faced by the industry, such as the lack of understanding of the technology and the need for a supportive regulatory environment. It will also explore ways to overcome these hurdles. Now, the discussion will also touch upon the importance of investing in education and training programs to develop a skilled workforce capable of driving innovation and growth in the Web3 space. Now, to moderate this session, I request CNBC TV 18's Manisha Gupta, Editor Commodities and Currencies, to come on stage. Let's have a huge round of applause for Manisha. Now I'd request our eminent panelists for this session to join Manisha on stage. And first we have Srinath Sridharan, author, policy researcher and corporate advisor. Huge round of applause for all our panelists. Next we have Anna Roy, senior advisor, Niti Aayog. We also have Mr. Deepak Bagla, Managing Director and CEO, Invest India. Next we have Prashant Swaminathan, Partner, Woodstock Fund. And last but not the least, we have Ajit Khurana, Founder, Reflexical Private Limited, who will be joining us virtually from Dubai. Over to you, Manisha.
Radhika, thank you so much for this. The first Namaste Web3, when we did that in Bangalore, I thought that was an amazing success. All developers, geeks, people who were enthusiasts within the space, all of them turned out. But look at Delhi, and you do not ever cease to amaze us. so many enthusiasts. We had so many registrations here, and it's so great to be here with all of you. And so much has been spoken about already by our previous keynote speakers. We have been told that this is the opportunity to learn, unlearn, relearn, and that the $1 trillion opportunity that we keep talking about by 2032 is something that NASSCOM, ENY, and FICCI have spoken about. And there are so many other international reports as well, which tell us on the kind of opportunity that is waiting to explode, and whether or not India will be a part of this. As has been said as well, that Web 1 and Web 2, we missed out a lot there, but Web 3, well, this is our time, and we definitely want to be part of this. So thank you, panelists, for joining us. And I want to start with numbers, and this is the opening comment that I would want from all of you. When we look at crypto, we were among the top 5. Look at DeFi, and we are at the 6th number. Web 3, and the pace has been so very fast there. Starting with you itself, how would you look at the reason for this run-up? How do you look at the opportunity? And how do you see India reacting to all of this?
So I think Web3, we could be 15% of Indian GDP by 2032. I mean, that's 1/6. I mean, today no industry dominates it with that kind of vehemence. Services dominate 54% of our GDP. So 1/6. So for the policymakers to realize that if you have to steer 1/6, it also solves for entrepreneurship and employment problem. That's something that I did not see in the slides. The industry has to portray that. 2, I think globally, we did not have the political and the economic heft 20 years ago to participate in Web 1 and Web 2. A lot of technology folks won't like it, but we were still seen as a nation of body shoppers then, who were dependent on dollar arbitrage to survive. But Web 3 is very different. We are a very, very different nation. Yet G20 is probably one of the forum, but not the only forum, to assert Indian participation in Web 3. But unfortunately, Web 3 is seen equal to crypto. Yeah. I mean, how do we overcome that? I think there's a lot of policy education that we need to do. And I think that sense of cynicism saying, are they really for real? That's needed to be solved. So policy will also come with the problem of pain. And how do we assure those worries are gone away?
Oh, well, yes. I absolutely get your point. The crypto, blockchain, Web 3, all of that just seems to be synonymous, which is not the case, by the way. But Anna, coming to you for your opening comments as well, with the kind of growth that we've seen, with the kind of enthusiasm every single keynote speaker has had, how do you look at that, and how would you validate that?
So I would not like to go into numbers. It could be 1 trillion, it could be 2 trillion, so you can, throw any number around. I saw all the data points which Dilip also shared. So numbers are in one place. As a policy maker, I am more on the potential of the technology, for which awareness and knowledge about the technology is important. And that is what we in Niti Aayog try to focus on. And when we talk about technology, at least from where I am coming, I like to see what the technology can help us achieve. And because there are other departments who look at R&D of the technology, having the robust startup ecosystem or other enabling frameworks to nurture the entrepreneurship in that technology. In Niti Aayog, when we look at emerging technologies, we try to see how we can mainstream these respective technologies in the reform agenda of the government, how they can be leveraged to achieve the various goals of which the government has set for itself. And the present government, since 2014, one of their cornerstone kind of goals has been inclusive growth. And the cyber physical technology that we see today, that is, I feel compared to all the previous technologies, this is one area which can really help us overcome our information asymmetry, access barriers, various other problems which are very, very old, and we all know about it. But this is a very potent technology which can help us address governance, address many other things. And we see today we see how the technology has been leveraged to address ease of doing business, ease of living, and in the past we have been really in the catch-up phase, but now when UPI goes to 12 countries, then we are setting the stage. We are the leaders, and we have the potential to be the leaders. And I think Web3 is another emerging areas where we have the potential to be the leader, to export the technology rather than be in the catching up game. The cyber physical technology, whether it is AI, whether it is AR, VR, whatever you may refer to, they are also very intrusive, because now digital has really permeated in our physical life. So the responsible use of technology is equally important. That is why the government is testing the waters, coming out with curated regulation, because the technology in itself is evolving. It is not something, that is what its contours are. AI today is still a black box. So I think it is a balancing game, but there is a potential, and we need to kind of, work on that.
Absolutely, and as you said, ever evolving is the word to perhaps define this. But since you've spoken about entrepreneurs here, and we do know that Niti Aayog has partnered with Fire Network Capital, talk to us more about this blockchain module that you already have launched.
Unfortunately, that is being done by another wing of Niti Aayog, Atal Innovation Mission. So I am not the right person to give you the details about that particular initiative. But as far as the part which I handle, the policy and other aspects, we do a number of pilots. And based on the pilot projects, we try to get learnings. And these pilots are being rolled out in, in collaboration with startups and other companies. We also have, we also launch challenges, which we do with Atal Innovation, like the Digi Yatra, which you see today being rolled out at airports. That was done by us and Niti Aayog, where Atal provided us with the framework. So I feel that, I would like to, without going into the detail of the FIRE program, I would like to refer to our approach. First of all, we try to address the regulation with the innovation bias. That is what is one of the planks. The second thing is engaging with the industry to understand what is happening, what are the pain points, what are the other issues, and trying to present a platform where we can bring in all stakeholders. And lastly, to roll out pilot projects to understand what does it mean to adopt these technologies on the ground. Because in my view, development of the technology is the easiest part. It is the adoption and rollout which is more difficult, and that is the part which we address.
And let's not even start talking about the regulatory aspect of it. I mean, that is something, that framework is something that we are all awaiting right now. So Prashant, this one is to you, and almost every speaker ahead spoke about on how there has been a talent drain because there is no regulatory clarity. 450 startups, 200 perhaps have moved out. So what would you say is the need of the hour right now? There are deliberations happening within the country, internationally as well.
Yeah, I think to kind of beat the horse again, I think it's regulatory clarity to start with. I think if you look at even our portfolio companies, the ones that we had, they were originally in India and they were almost entirely moved out now. The biggest reason they say is lack of regulatory clarity as well. And that is, I would say, definitely the need of the hour. Now, of course, there are other aspects around this as well. I think Dr. Singhvi had mentioned this in terms of upskilling, right? I think that is also very important. It's not just specific to blockchain and emerging technology that we have suddenly realized that our workforce needs to be upskilled, but I think it's something that has been prevailing for a while, which reflects in our lower productivity as well, right? So I think that is also definitely something that we can look into. And thirdly, I would say also having a lot more awareness about the technology, both from the positives in terms of how it can impact various industries, and also in terms of negatives, that the government has, or the regulator has rightly pointed out are its, are limitations or things that need to be focused upon as well, right? So that type of awareness needs to pervade through the society towards, so India can rise as one towards Web3 proliferation.
Oh, clearly. Ajit Khurana, this one is to you, and it's good to see you after a very long time, by the way. But what is your sense on the importance of supportive ecosystem when you talk about startups and entrepreneurs? I mean, that is something that is missing right now. How much important is that, would you say? While there are almost a lot of other things as well which are required right now, but the regulatory framework first.
The supporting ecosystem is actually too optimistic a word. I'm really talking of framework. Going back roughly 30 years, when share certificates got digitized, what we call dematerialization or DMAT, later when payment systems got digitized and NEFT came and really helped us, then RTGS, IMPS, eventually leading to UPI, I think that when these enabling opportunities were available, the ecosystem went and created a lot of value on top of it. I love the fact that we are talking of an enabling ecosystem, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic or pessimistic, but I'm saying that the first step is not about, hey, how can we help this? The first step is, how can we move out of their way and let the industry do what it wants? Just imagine if we were still all writing checks and visiting bank branches. Just imagine if we have to physically transfer share certificates. So digitization brought level 1 of the revolution. The level 2 is when these digital assets, whether it's a DMAT share, whether it is your rupees that you hold in a bank account, can get intelligent, which means not just paper becomes digital. That is the revolution that we are standing in front of. I dare say that it is at par with what we see in AI and machine learning on one hand, and electric vehicle sustainability, space travel on the other hand. We are talking of an opportunity of that size. If you ignore for 1 second MICA, which is a new regulation that has come in England, the European region, all the major economies of the world which are comparable in size with India have taken the regulatory and policy framework where they have read existing laws to either read crypto, blockchain, digital assets into them, or sometimes there have been tweaks. 2 years ago, India made a start where we tweaked our Income Tax Act, to account for specifically crypto. Few days ago, PMLA was tweaked. So I personally don't have a challenge with that. We don't necessarily have to be like the financial havens, the Cayman Islands and the Maltas and stuff where we come up with an act. I hope we come up with an act. All I'm saying is not necessary. We don't have to have a regulator who is crypto specific, blockchain specific. I hope we have it. But even if we don't do any of that, the easiest thing is take everything right from Consumer Protection Act to PMLA to FEMA to all of those and read them to include crypto. Tomorrow we have a regulation.
Oh, well, yes. So much to talk about, but I want to also take an example from you, Srinath, and NASSCOM clearly has come out with a report stating that state governments should create their own differentiated sandboxes with use cases. We've seen metaverse as a subject of that. Dilip talked about Telangana taking a lot of lead into that as well. How do you read this, and would you say that this is exactly what the governments perhaps need to do?
I mean, I'm kind of divided there. One is to say positive outcomes, healthcare, governance, e-governance, citizenry benefits. I mean, everything is possible potentially on Web3. But how much of transparency do policymakers actually want to come when it comes to their own work? They want everybody to have governance, but how open are they to citizens questioning their own efforts? For example, let's say if you have a project and you say it's going to be time-bound approval, 90 days approval. Typically, you always get the last day of that 90 days somebody raising and the clock is reset. What if you say the clock is only paused and not reset? Web3 can make it happen, but will our bureaucrats like it? I have a kind of a question mark there. So the point is, e-governance is clearly possible, public governance is clearly possible. But more importantly, I see Web3 as a redefined word. If I look at it as an acronym, I think it's World Empowerment Business. And the three stakeholders are very clear: the people, policy, and the planet. I mean, if you redefine Web3 in that sense, almost everything is possible. But which stakeholder wants to be dirty linen washed clean in public? And that's the biggest challenge I have.
Srinath, just another one on this. So, when you look at one government do it in certain use cases, do you think there are possibilities perhaps of collaborations where state governments are talking about each other? I mean, it's a technology and everybody should be wanting to take lead in this.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, it should be a digital public good, which means if one state creates something and it's a good product, allow that framework as like an open protocol for everybody to use. And I think that's where the states can take the lead and probably the lead title, but allow others to use as well. And this has been, I think, example has been set by the government of India, right? I mean, everything that has been developed is a digital public good. Today we can do, let's say, strategic exports if India wants to do so. I think that's where the challenge is, because how do you link it to intellectual property protection? Can we strengthen our IP, trademarks? I mean, our patents office is one of the slowest in the world. I mean, you have lots of MNCs in India who develop in India, but actually file it in the US and UK. While, of course, the last 1 year we've been speaking about it, but still action on the ground in terms of time-bound patent grants. So everybody sitting here suddenly will realize that whatever process, technology they create can be patented in India. And that's the power of technology.
Well, I asked you a question and you put out more questions. All right. This is to you, Prashant. So, looking at the kind of scenario that we are in right now, what would you say would be an enabler when we look at policies or framework? What do we need first? What is the priority right now? What are those first 3 things that you think we need right now?
I think first would be whatever we can do to prevent brain drain. Right? Because without the talent in the country, it's very difficult to create interesting products, right? And the way I would address prevention of brain drain is, of course, we have, I don't want to use regulation word again, but again, some sort of comfort that we can give to the ecosystem of Web3 within India, in the sense of, yes, we are here to protect you and also to ensure that we give you the right pedestal to succeed for Web3, right? Because I don't think we are looking much beyond in the future in terms of its potential. Like, if I just quote like a very simple analogy, right? You have Ola today, which is an Indian company catering to Indians, but in Web3, you can create a company sitting in, tier 2, tier 3 city, which is catering to the world, right? And that's an immense potential. And that is something we have to kind of safeguard, and prevention of brain drain by giving sufficient comfort to the ecosystem is, I think, the #1 priority in my mind, right? Outside of that, then I know we spoke about Telangana as an example. I actually sit on the governing council of that sandbox as well. But I think, having these sandboxes come from, say, places like SEBI or RBI, right? And giving startups a very closed environment to try their project solutions and test it out in a limited environment is, I think, a fabulous way for both the private and the public sector to get used to the nuances of Web3 as a technology as well, right? And I think that can go a long way. We've seen this happening now in UK with the FCA, or even in Singapore with the MAS. And again, that goes back to giving them a lot of comfort that the country is behind you to want to support this. And the third thing, I think, is this is true for people on this side of Web3 or that side, is to be less focused on price action or where the price of these coins are going tomorrow, and be more focused on the utility that this can bring towards the long-term benefit of the society. So I think that's the third thing, also important, specific to India again, I would say, because all the numbers we are quoting right now are mostly in the speculating world, right? But there is a much larger world in Web3 which can go much beyond the speculatory aspects of it.
All right. You're talking numbers which Anna doesn't want to talk, so I'm not going to get to that, get to you with that. But just jumping on from when we're talking about collaborations between states, has Niti Aayog been discussing with other organizations? Are you sharing what you're doing? And how do you see Web3 adding value to the economy?
No, of course, Niti, one of its roles is cooperative federalism, and in that we collaborate with states. I mentioned pilot projects, that is in collaboration with states. And we have tested out many pilots, and all the reports are up on the Niti website. So these are like case studies, you know, how do you approach the technology, how do you test it out, and I think it's also an important way of creating awareness. I'm not a tech background person. It happened to me while working in Niti, and over time I have seen, you know, a lot of lack of appreciation of tech, not only in the government but outside the government also. So you put something, you digitalize and you say it is on a blockchain. So, you know, when we started, our first pilot was actually land, and that was the one which we were not able to complete, because digitizing land records is not putting land records on blockchain. To explain that to people is very difficult. And we feel that by doing more and more pilots, we are able to address that. That one we did with the local government of Chandigarh. We have been actively collaborating with Telangana and also other states, whoever is willing. And presently, Niti has a more structured way of reaching out to states under the state support mission. And once it's rolled out, in the coming months, I would expect a more structured way of you know, collaborating with states, because at the end of the day, you know, all these solutions will have a very important impact on the ground, and you cannot do it without the local administration, without working with states. Now, I think there is a lot of potential for the technology. But I would also say that India is not perhaps uniquely the only country which is still kind of working it out. Other countries, other jurisdictions are also doing it. Being a very diverse country, where diversity is not only, you know, in the way you dress or speak, but also in literacy, various other aspects. One has to be more circumspect in, you know, in India. It's not a small country which is with a very uniform kind of population, and security is important, financial sector is important. Having said all that, I think our Honorable Finance Minister on several occasions have said that since this is, you know, this digital technology really defies boundaries to a large extent. But everybody recognizes the potential of the technology, and I think G20 presents a very, very important platform. And it has been mentioned by Honorable Finance Minister that when countries come together and agree on the standards, on other guidelines, that is when, you know, adoption will rise. And so in its presidency, I expect more things to come. The PMLA notification, I think some may think that it's not a big thing, but in my view it's one of the big, very important steps, and that is what we had been arguing for, that you know, exchanges are the center which needs to be kind of regulated, and I think it's an important move. And during its presidency, I look forward to more such steps to bring more, you know, vibrancy in the ecosystem.
Oh, that's absolutely very well said. Okay, so I'll start winding down this conversation, and I'll go to each one of my panelists here for their final comments as well. Ajit, I'll start with you. So whether we talk about creativity, innovation, favorable environment, policy, regulations which can be supervised as well, what is your sense on how the stakeholders here can come together and form or ensure all of this?
A lot of the technological revolution we saw beginning in the early 90s with body shopping, late 90s with IT services, the Wipros, Infosys, etc. coming up, actually tended to give or originate economic benefit to the technically proficient, the engineering part. Web3 is one of the first tech innovations which actually promises to give as many or maybe more employment opportunities to even the non-tech people, because there's a huge human dimension to it. There's a huge community dimension to it. So I think let us not miss that. It is the first such revolution that I am being part of. Of course, there was the financial services revolution. So what we have to do today is that while the states can come up with their own way of thinking, but the enabling framework, like for example, if there's any cross-border nature to it, well, FEMA comes on the path. It is not something that states can do anything about. I would say being open-minded at the policy level, the word fast does not go very well with policy making, but being not too slow when it comes to policy making, being not left behind and missing the bus at the global level, and finally insisting on issues, not just encouraging but insisting on issues related to transparency, education, consumer awareness, etc. These are fabulous first points. And on the regulatory part, just one sentence: begin all regulatory effort by demanding transparency from industry participants. Just the transparency, and that does the trick.
Fair point that. So your final comments as well, Srinath, on this. So when you look at private and stakeholders and government working on this together, what do you see coming forth?
So I think industry putting its best foot for building trust capital. They're able to raise capital, but trust capital seems to be a deficit with the regulators. That's one for sure. Two, I think capacity building not only in terms of talent, but also actually delivering talent. Today's capacity in the academic world to speak about or train on Web3 is almost non-existent. Which means the industry participants, the young entrepreneurs and the founders have to go back as visiting faculty to train people that they will want. So and India's expenditure on R&D is one of the lowest in the world. So don't expect the government to do the heavy lifting. The industry, if you can start like CSR, set aside funds and do R&D, I think you will make your own channel there.
Well, Prashant, your final comments. Where do you see more opportunities? And as Srinath rightly said, there are challenges and risks as well involved.
You mean in the overlap between private and public sector? See, I think what we have been guilty on both sides is working in silos in terms of the private sector talking about Web3 ecosystem, not wanting to think too much about the regulatory side or tax, money laundering and those things that are also very important. And then there is a public sector on the government side, on the regulator side, who have their challenges and who have been trying to address some of those things as well. We have seen this AML policy also coming in, which I think is a brilliant step in the right direction. I think there needs to be a lot of overlap in the discussions going forward. So the private sector can also present its challenges and also make the regulator, etc., aware as to how the tide is turning and which way the wind is blowing as well from a global standpoint. And at the same time, the government can also put forward its challenges as well in terms of how do we go about doing this, right? And I think there needs to be a lot more active dialogue between these two sectors. And if we are here unified, wanting India to be at the forefront of Web3, then I think this is a must that we cannot get around.
Alright, so this is what the panel has been telling us, that Web3 is the way forward. The numbers can be way higher than what we are perhaps forecasting right now, but regulatory framework is one part of it, collaborations, technology, skill development, training, awareness, education, and there is just so much more that really needs to be done here. Panelists, thank you so much for taking time out for us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Manisha and all the panelists. Before you leave, I would request everyone to stay back for a quick photo op. Thank you once again to all our panelists. That was quite an informative session, and we are confident that India does have the potential to take a leap in Web3. A big round of applause for all our panelists. Now, up next, we have a special address by Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, former Minister for Law and Justice, Communications, Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. He is a parliamentarian since 2000 and has been elected as a member of Rajya Sabha in the year 2000, 2006, 2012 and 2018, and a member of Lok Sabha from Patna Sahib Parliamentary Constituency in the general elections of 2019. Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad has held many ministerial assignments in various departments where by his vision and governance model he could promote good governance and also undertake reforms. As the Minister of Information Technology for close to 7 years under the government headed by Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, he pioneered the famous Digital India program under the overall direction of Prime Minister, which today has of course become an important transformative program leading to digital delivery of services, digital skilling and digital inclusion. As Law Minister, he has introduced many path-making legislation like Triple Talaq abolition, which empowered women, getting nearly 1400 old laws revoked. He improved the infrastructure of judiciary, including e-courts and digitization. He also activated and redesigned the postal department with many reforms initiatives. Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad will be speaking on Web3's role in citizen-centric governance. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad.
Friends, good evening. It is a pleasure to be here and seeing so many young friends, excited, inquisitive, and also entrepreneurs. The future of Web3 in India. I would like to appreciate the Forbes magazine, the platform it associates, that they are seeking to educate, enlighten India and Indians about the need for Web3. Why Web3 is important? I will add, Web3 is important with a caution. Technology is always growing. Technology, as we say, particularly the information technology, the digital technology, is borderless. There is no limit on innovation. Just to give one example, in the year 2015, in a very coordinated way, the startup movement started by the vision of the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Today, we have close to 1 lakh startups. Many of them are unicorns, valuation close to 1 billion plus. Many of them are supplying products to outside India. Many of them are young people, hardly 25, 30, 35, making millions and millions. That is the ecosystem which technology creates, and we need to salute. But as far as use of web technology as a tool of delivery of services in governance, it has immense potential. And let me draw a little upon the success of Digital India technology. How this Digital India technology started, this journey started. I remember in the year 2014, when Narendra Modi ji was campaigning to become the Prime Minister. He had coined a very interesting expression. If I am elected the Prime Minister, I would like to create an India where IT plus IT is equal to IT. Which simply means IT, information technology, plus IT, India's talent, is equal to IT India tomorrow. That is the vision he gave. And I never knew that such a heavy load he will put on my slippery shoulders for 7 years. Digital India was capsuled from that concept. And his instruction to me was very clear. Make its definition very simple, understandable. Whenever you talk about technology, then big words come. And for my first recommendation to you is, if you can have a simpler version of Web3, that will be more sellable in India. That is my advice to you, without impinging upon the tradition per se of Web3. I remember when we discussed a lot, then finally I wrote it myself. Digital India is designed to empower ordinary Indians with the power of technology, number one. Bridging the digital divide, number two. And bringing in digital inclusion. हमें समावेशी भारत बनाना है. Digital India must reach the commonest people of India. And this must be achieved through technology, which is homegrown, economical, and also inclusive. Now kindly see, Aadhaar is a homegrown technology, made in India, low cost. UPI is a made in India technology, low cost. This whole other movement, digital locker to other things, today have become a big movement in the country, which I will very briefly revert to about its exact products and use taking place in the country. Therefore, what is the biggest assurance for us in India? And how we can leverage technology? Just to give you one example, we opened up 42 crore bank account, Jan Dhan, for the poor and the underprivileged. We linked that with Aadhaar. What is Aadhaar, my friends? Aadhaar is the digital identity to supplement the physical identity. And how does Aadhaar function? I hope all of you know it. By application of your fingerprint in your iris. God has created you in a manner that by plastic surgery you can change everything, but you cannot change your iris and your fingerprint. The digital identity supplemented the physical identity. Remember one more number. India's population 1.32 billion plus. India is home to 1.3 billion Aadhaar card, digital identity. India is home to 1.2 billion phones and mobile phones. Now, fixed phone number is very small. India is close to 800 million smartphone. What is a smartphone? A moving computer. And nearly 750 million internet penetration. 95% of mobile phones in India are having internet today. With cheapest video, data. This whole ecosystem has become so vibrant. When I travel to the hinterland of India in quest of my political activity, the biggest assurance to me is to hear you young people telling me in the villages, Ravi bhaiya, Googling hum bhi karna seekh gaye hain. Hum bhi Googling karte hain. Hum bhi search engine chalate hain. That is the empowerment we were keen to ensure by bridging the digital divide. Today, if you ask the commonest people, WhatsApp mein bhej dijiye na, video mein bhej dijiyega. Have you noticed the metamorphosis which is happening in the people's taste as far as appropriation of technology is concerned? Just to give you, we linked the Aadhaar with the mobile phone and the bank account. We have sent 26 lakh crore till December 2022. And how much we have saved? 2,71,000 crores, which used to be pocketed by middlemen and fictitious claimant in gas subsidy, in ration subsidy, in Manrega payment. How? And people are relishing it. We give 11 crore farmers 2 lakh crore every year, 2,000 every 3 months. Many times the Prime Minister clicks and the account is there in the bank account of the farmers. A scholarship, you click, it is there in your bank account. And the biggest thing happened was during COVID. And I'm sure all of you must have experienced, because I was handling the portfolio then. All the messages used to come through digital technology. All the cautions used to come through digital technology. And this Made in India vaccine, 200 crore doses have been administered, first dose, second dose, booster. And where you used to get the information? On your mobile phone. Your first dose is fixed on this date at this location. Go and take it. And if you haven't taken, again a reminder there. How this big digital infrastructure could be created, in which people came to have a trust, belief, utility. Therefore, whether it is DigiLocker, again 5 lakhs is 2,000 are there. Have you heard an animal known as Common Service Center, my young friends? Go and village in the hinterland and explore how they are doing. Their number was 70,000 in 2014. Now they have come to close to 5.5 lakhs. They are making land records. They are making passport. They are working like frontage of postal payment. They are using, I started that services for pre-litigation advice. Lakhs of people are availing that. A distraught daughter-in-law or a farm workers, etc., etc. Now, such an entrepreneurship developed that many of the big companies are using them as their off-campus or off-shop front. Tum mal mera becho, commission le lo. Close to 15 lakh people work there, including about 70,000 women entrepreneurs. Digital technology has an inbuilt capacity to encourage entrepreneurship, to promote innovation, and most important, a sense of great fulfillment. And I see a lot of young ladies sitting here. It was height of COVID. One day I was talking to many of the CSC entrepreneurs digitally. All of them were very down कि सब लॉकडाउन है, क्या करें. तो हमने कहा कुछ नया सोचो तुम. Then one of them told me from Odisha, and I had called only women entrepreneurs. उसको हिंदी कम आती थी. कहा सर एक दिन हमने 100 समोसा बना के अपने कंप्यूटर पे डाल दिया कि मेरे पास है, जिसको लेना हो ले लो. एक घंटे के अंदर बिक गया. नेक्स्ट डे आई पुट 500 समोसाज, वो भी बिक गया. हमने कहा दिस इज द फ्यूचर. एंड फ्रॉम देयर केम ई ग्रामीण स्टोर. आई विल सरप्राइज टू नो that there was a particular festival in Odisha where a particular sari is used, and all these suppliers used their platform and they did the business of only 200 crores. This is how opportunity is created. How does Web3 fix itself into this model of India? There's a reason as to why I explain all this. If Web3 has to succeed, if Web3 has to really have roots, it will have to be inclusive, number one. It must be in a position to touch the lives of the commonest people of India. Just to tell you how the potential is there of all these enterprise, I told my team in the IT department, I want to see BPO in small Mufassil towns of India. I created a program for that. I will give incentive. We had about 55,000 seats. We gave incentive to all. Today BPO is there in Nagaland, in Kohima, in Siliguri, in Muzaffarpur, in Gaya, in Mumbai, Maharashtra, smaller places, in Tamil Nadu, smaller places. Because this appetite for digital platform optimum use has become all India pervasive. That's what I would like to highlight. In that way of the matter, Web3 has to adjust, has to accommodate, has to work with this India. And you have to work with this India. I'm a great supporter of blockchain. But crypto is a different ballgame altogether. Let me be very clear about it. Because in crypto, there are issues of financial sovereignty of India. And yes, Web3 blockchain has to be permissionless, has to be autonomous by its very nature, and has to be very exploratory, granted. But there are issues also to be reflected upon. Yes, Government of India has come with a blockchain strategic paper in their 2021, if I recall it correctly. But what is important is Web3 movement has to walk in sync with the Digital India movement. Have you seen digital payment, how even a rickshaw wala, a tanga wala, an auto wala is making digital payment these days? They don't even bother ki where is all the necessary documents or the permission. Jai Panda, your term will come after me. You be comfortable. That is how you have to see. Therefore, Jai is good friend. He is the vice president of the BJP and also a man of technology. That's what he claims. How far it is successful, you will hear him then decide. But what is important, this is in lighter vein, he is really a man of technology. But what is important is, this Web3 has to come out of the shadows of crypto. I am very clear about it. And yes, I do understand that this whole blockchain business has immense potential. So many young Indian entrepreneurs are doing so well outside and taking Indian young talented pool from India in their employment. It creates a lot of employment without fail. But again, big caveat, don't make it crypto-centric. And it is my earnest recommendation to all of you is that as Digital India today has become a global phenomena, you see that the world is talking about Digital India because it is digital inclusion. And I can tell you, countries from African countries, Latin American countries, all are trying to follow India's model. Please tell us, is it possible that Web3 model which will be created in India should be India-centric, designed to serve the interest of the common man and offering great utility for developing countries? That is my second reference to all of you. And the third is Indian young mind. I am always a great supporter of Indian young mind. Has a great appetite for innovation. Thrice I had the privilege to go and award Indian entrepreneurs in Bengaluru in Economic Times Award. One day a young lanky fellow came. He was very intellectual type. He has got the first award of rupees 20 lakh. तो हमने कहा जनाब क्या करेंगे आप? I was told his father is an IAS officer. कहा आप क्या करेंगे? आप भी IAS बनेंगे? कहा no sir, I believe in my fingers and my laptop. Enough. Right. Then go ahead. That is the new India which is emerging. Confident, seeking to exploit opportunity and scale high. How Web3 movement can encourage them to explore more is the larger question. My good luck to you. With a great degree of caution again, come out of the shadows of crypto. Thank you. Namaste. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for those enlightening words. Now, let's move on to our next discussion. It's going to be a fireside chat on the topic leveraging India's G20 presidency to advance the development of VDA regulatory principles through international cooperation. And to moderate this discussion, I'll again like to call on stage CNBC TV 18's Manisha Gupta, Editor Commodities and Currencies. And to discuss this, we have with us today a very distinguished guest, Baijyant Panda, National Vice President BJP. He's also the in charge of Assam and Delhi BJP units. He has been a 4-time member of Parliament of India, elected twice each to the Rajya Sabha 2000 and 2006 and the Lok Sabha 2009 and 2014. He had been a member of BJP National Core Group to articulate and communicate the rationale for amending Article 370 of the Indian Constitution relating to Jammu and Kashmir. He was also the chairman of the high-level expert committee formed by Ministry of Defence for restructuring the National Cadet Corps. We are so delighted to have you, sir. Over to you, Manisha.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us and taking your time out for us. And this is one conversation all of us have been waiting to hear. I will start with the G20 presidency for India, and there are so many expectations, and this is something that people believe that India will make use of, especially when it comes to enacting laws and regulations around blockchain, crypto, NFTs, DeFi. There's just so many verticals to this. Where do we stand right now, and what is the progress?
India's presidency of the G20 comes at a very opportune time. In recent years, particularly since the pandemic, the image of India has dramatically changed around the world. Even as we transition into becoming a middle-income country, we showed leadership to the world. We rolled out the biggest ever vaccination campaign in the history of the world. We helped more than 100 countries with hundreds of millions of vaccines, and some of which were developed in India itself. So that respect has gone up tremendously. India today is acknowledged, not just in the G20, but across the world, as a key player in shaping the major decisions that the world needs to take. And so technology, of course, is a very important part of this. This has come up. The world of technology is changing at an even more rapid pace than we've seen it do. And there are challenges, there are enormous opportunities, and there are enormous dangers of some of these technologies. And so it's a good thing that at this moment in history, and there is one more transition that's happening, in terms of the regulatory environment, the India that we knew traditionally was a follower. We'd wait until bigger countries in terms of economic size and more technological clout would take a decision, and then we would start implementing them. But over the last decade or so, you've started seeing that India is beginning to feel comfortable with its new sort of self-assuredness of starting to take some of the cutting-edge decisions itself. And I think we can talk about that as we go along.
Well, yes. So, that exactly was my next question, because while we are waiting to do a collaborated standard of procedures internationally, but we have seen other countries like perhaps US, Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore do come out with some basic laws when it comes to virtual digital assets rather. India really seems to be lacking there.
I think we need to understand that there are three issues that are very relevant to the question that you just asked. Number one, India has certain special challenges that most of these other countries don't have. So we have a challenge of terrorism, which has in the past operated through unaccounted cash, illicit printing of currency, cross-border smuggling. And I don't think it comes as any surprise to anybody to realize that illegal activities and criminal and terrorist activities rely on some of these new technologies to bypass the scrutiny of the authorities. And so India's challenge is far more than what a US might face, the drug smuggling cartels using some of these technologies for hiding their loot. But in India, it's not just a question about tax evasion. We have that too, because we are still transitioning into a country where the tax net is wide enough. And to widen the tax net, again, in the past, there have been traditional ways that people have evaded taxes. There are modern technological ways that people evade taxes. So we have these challenges. And as I mentioned to your earlier question, we are transitioning. I often use the phrase that New India today is well along the path of transitioning from what I used to call diffidence to confidence. Perhaps from our colonial experience, for many decades after independence, we used to hunker down, we used to seal off our economy. Now that has started changing. Indians are flourishing all over the world. Indians are flourishing in India as well. And so we are stepping up to make some of these decisions much more rapidly than we used to in the past. I gave the example of Vaccine Maitri. That couldn't have happened. That massive rollout couldn't have happened without the use of technology and without the use of without policymakers taking decisions to facilitate that. So when it comes to policies or regulatory environment for cutting edge technologies which involve crypto or which involve blockchain, we have challenges that other nations don't have. But I want to leave my answer to this question with the thought that you shouldn't think that Indian policymakers are closed-minded. Caution is sometimes called for in blockchain technologies, in crypto. Even countries that don't have these challenges of terrorism and massive tax evasion, see what happened to FTX. So in hindsight, a little bit of caution is probably not unreasonable.
We get your point, sir. While the regulatory aspect is much awaited, we do understand that this is an ever-evolving technology. What we started 5 years ago and what we've done on a yearly basis with NFTs and DeFi, decentralization, yielding of cryptocurrencies, I mean, something has been coming in every year. When you make regulations, would you say that this time around, perhaps, whatever regulations are made will need to keep changing as we move ahead?
The need for regulations to get updated is much more today because of the speed at which technology is changing. Now, you talked about NFTs. I want to use an anecdote. You know, when I was referring to you in your earlier question to older methods of tax evasion and other illicit practices, do you remember certain famous politicians suddenly becoming artists and selling their paintings for many crores of rupees? Now, can you imagine how much easier that would be to do if NFTs, besides whatever their natural market value is, were suddenly to trade in favor of certain individuals for huge sums of money? So, you know, there are real issues that one needs to think about. I think the reality is that our effort at being up to date is being bootstrapped much more rapidly. Look at look at the policy making engagements that are taking place between government, between industry, between technocrats, and between startups, which even, I mean, you may think that this is still a bit not as fast as it ought to be, but compared to just a few years ago, there's been a rapid change. And I'm very confident that in the coming months and the coming years, you will see a much greater capacity and capability of the regulators in India to keep up and take necessary decisions.
So you talked about the startups and entrepreneurs, and the last couple of years have seen a lot of talent drain happen from India because of lack of clarity here. You know, people are waiting that tell us whether you're doing it, not doing it, give us a time frame, because we've seen a lot of companies which launched in India now operating out of Singapore or a US or a Hong Kong for that matter, Dubai even.
No, I think what you're pointing out is a real issue, but we should see this in a larger context. So for example, quite a significant number of Indians, individuals, not companies, have been taking up residency abroad for a variety of reasons. In the past, it used to be because there weren't opportunities in India. They used to go abroad for jobs or for further career. But in the recent decades, it has been about tax arbitrage. It has been about regulatory environments which are easier to deal with. Now, the reality is, a small island nation or a small free port entrepot which doesn't have democracy, where people can take decisions quickly, can in fact take very rapid decisions on regulations. That can be great, it can be very fast, but it can also have other consequences down the road. I think this is recognized that we need to provide a level playing field so that entrepreneurs, startups don't feel that even though their market is India, even though their talent pool is India, even though their technologies are now increasingly being developed in India, they need to be incorporated in one of these other free ports or island nations. It's something that we need to recognize and find solutions for.
The other thing that the Indian entrepreneurs and especially people belonging to Web3 have been an audience of is RBI wanting to ban it, Finance Ministry telling us that we are waiting for international collaborations to work on it. Would you say that it is between departments as well that we are awaiting clarity from?
No, I don't think it's so much about between departments in India. I'll go back to what I said earlier and expand upon it. We genuinely do have many challenges that some of the other nations don't have. You know, we still have terror attacks which are planned, funded, trained from other countries and across the border. And these are areas where you may be using crypto for all the right reasons, but there are people out there who are using it for the wrong reasons. And we need to find an answer. Now, nobody questions in India, whether it's RBI or any ministry or any regulator, that blockchain, the technology itself, has wide-ranging applications and we must adopt it. The issue is about crypto, really. Now, take a look at Bitcoin. Something like 85% of the Bitcoin in circulation is held by less than 5% of the entities. Now, that ought to raise some red flags somewhere. So, what has RBI said? RBI is a central bank, and crypto essentially is a fundamental challenge to the concept of central banking. So when they exercised caution, there are many reasons why they've done so. Now, in the meantime, other regulatory environments, including the US, including other countries, have started looking at it very closely. There are hearings going on in the US because of the FTX fiasco. So what RBI has said really sums it all up, that there are tremendous opportunities with not just blockchain, but with crypto also. But there are also tremendous risks that we can't afford to just ignore. And so the framework is to really work together with other countries, because India can't be an outlier. So it's not so much about, if you see the statements made by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and if you see the statements made by RBI Governor Shaktikant Das, they are on the same page. So internally there is not that much work that needs to be done, but the work in collaborating, cooperating with other nations, some of which are beginning, there are some nations that had become very enthusiastic about crypto a couple of years ago. Some of them are taking a pause and re-evaluating the risks as well as the benefits. Nobody denies there are enormous benefits. So I think the coordination part internationally is the important bit. And within G20, of course, the discussions are taking place, but it has to, ultimately go beyond G20 and get at least some common minimum acceptable parts of the regulatory framework.
Okay. So I have one more question, and this is after various summits that we do and a lot of people that we engage with on ground, that this is one community that the government doesn't engage with, with all stakeholders when it's about policy making or feedback or on ground with the kind of funding that's coming in, the many thousands of developers that we have in the country. What is the engagement levels that the government has with the private players or exchanges right now?
So I would say that this is a work in progress. Now, if you see, similar kinds of concerns used to be raised by other sectors, by traditional industries. But you may see now that it's a pretty regular practice for government. For example, leading up to the budget, the finance minister had wide-ranging consultations with all kinds of industry, with large industry, the traditional big names, with startups, with sectors that are both either new, manufacturing, services, technology. So this is much more so than used to be the case in previous years and previous decades. Now, as far as the tech sector is concerned, as far as something like blockchain and Bitcoin is concerned, this is really the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, if you will, of the regulatory questions that need to be answered throughout the world in all jurisdictions, as we've just been talking about. So I think you are beginning to see a level of consultation that is more than what used to be before, and I'm sure it will keep on increasing, so that if you mirror what is happening with other sectors, you will see that there is a recognition by this government, which was not the case earlier, that all, I'll give you an example. A decade or so ago, more than a decade ago, when the companies law was amended, as soon as it was amended, everybody was up in arms because there had been no consultations. There were completely arbitrary clauses in there, which many corporates just figured that was unworkable. So from day zero, it was a controversy, and it lasted for several years before corrections could take place. I think today you are seeing a change in that attitude. There is a recognition that before regulations are finalized, there will be consultations. Now, every decision will not be to the liking of every stakeholder, but in a country like India, we will keep up, we will change as necessary. And as I said, even if you make perfect regulations today, it will be out of date in 1 year. So
maybe before that.
let's not, as they say, make the perfect the enemy of the good. Let's accept good developments in the regulatory environment, even if they are not perfect, with the belief that it's an ongoing process, we can keep improving it.
All right. So I have a couple of more questions for you. One is, while we are awaiting for some regulations, the right regulations, or something to begin with, even experimental to begin with, during this time, the kind of uncertainty that the sector is facing, with more people going out, with people not knowing what's happening, we've seen huge fundings, billions of dollars in first quarter of 2022, but now that seems to be slowing down. People are still watching out for this. When it comes to awareness, education, understanding people there, how is government looking at that aspect of it?
So this is not just an India thing. So
I would agree.
In other countries also, now the US has made certain emergency changes in regulation when it comes to crypto, as to what it can be recognized for, what it can be used for, and what it can't be used for. And these are because of all the reasons that we've been talking about. So India and Indian policymakers are not just discussing amongst ourselves. As I said, there's discussions with counterparts across the G20. But there's also discussions with other institutions, global institutions such as the FSB, the Financial Stability Board, which is continually giving feedback about what it feels are areas that have some shortcomings where the regulations need to be improved. And there are many other such examples where we will take feedback and we will make the corrections necessary.
So, you know, the reports from NASSCOM, FICCI and ENY suggest that it's going to be $1 trillion of market by 2030, 2032, around that. So there are almost all of these leading agencies, R&D companies, research companies, which have started talking about Web3 as of now. Are you reading those reports?
Well, I'm not able to devote as much time to technology as my passion would demand. I have many things on my plate, but yes, I am reading some of those reports. And I can tell you, for example, NASSCOM's report that something like 10–11% of Web3 talent globally comes from India is a significant number actually. And the fact that in the last 3 or 4 years, the employment opportunities because of Web3 related technological development has gone up something like 140%. These are NASSCOM figures. Is quite impressive. Now, I think Web3 will be as transformational or even more so as the internet has been till now in India. You know, for example, today we have something like 900 million people with internet access. A large percentage of them already with broadband access. Today we have more than 600 million smartphones. And over the past few years, there was for a long period, the USO fund had not been utilized. But in the last few years, fiber has been rolled out to every panchayat headquarters in the country. And you're beginning to see, I know, for example, in my own constituency, there is a young man who used to work in Bengaluru, which is 1,000 miles away from Odisha. But since the pandemic, he has been working from his village, actual village, thatched huts and all, with proper fiber connectivity, and hasn't gone back even 3 years later. Has Bangalore salaries and lives in rural Odisha. You can imagine the transformation that is doing. So Web3 is going to be, in many ways, some of us can't even imagine how transformational it's going to be. The technologies are just getting out there. So yes, I try to keep up with it. Everybody recognizes, despite different levels of understanding of the technology, that this is huge.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us. But before I let you go, I have to tell you the first series that we did, this is the second by the way, first was in Bangalore, and being a tech city that it is, we had enthusiasts and developers and entrepreneurs and startups and everybody come in, and we were thinking, yes, Delhi is going to be slightly different, but from the registrations that we got in Delhi, we have been able to call only 35% people here. So we were amazed by the enthusiasm that Web3 enthusiasts were in Delhi as well. But thank you so much for addressing all of us. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Panda and Manisha, for that exciting and very informative discussion. And now it's time for our last panel discussion, and the topic we will be discussing today is building consensus, developing global regulatory standards for virtual digital assets. While India is working to forge consensus on a roadmap to regulate crypto, the panel discussion will delve into the opportunities that India has as the current G20 presidency to lead the development of VDA regulatory principles through international cooperation, role of various stakeholders, etc. The IMF paper on crypto assets was also discussed among major economies in India from January 15th to 16th. And to moderate this session, may I please welcome on stage Neha Botra, Assistant Editor, Forbes India. And the panelists joining us tonight are Gaurav Gogoi, Deputy Leader, Indian National Congress, Lok Sabha and two-time MP from Assam. We also have Rama Vedashri, Advisor, Dallas Venture Capital. And please welcome Shweta Shalini, State Secretary, BJP Maharashtra and spokesperson from BJP. And we have Gopal Jain, Senior Advocate. And last but not the least, Prashant Garg, Partner Consulting, EY. But before we proceed with our discussion, I would like to invite Sumit Gupta back on stage to unveil the book, The Fundamentals and Guiding Principles of the VDA Industry. Mr. Panda, we would be grateful if you can join us for the launch. And please, sir, please come join us on stage. Round of applause, please. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for all the panelists here and for the book that's just been launched here. And now it's time for the panel discussion. Over to you, Neha.
Hi everyone, it's been a good evening, information packed. We've discussed Web3, its potential and a lot more. I thought I'll open the panel and begin by asking the audience a question. How many of you or your children have used Web3 on a daily basis? Raise your hands. All right. How many of you have dabbled with virtual digital assets at one point or the other? All right, so that is a very telling representation for us. So let us now first begin by understanding what Web3 is and what the underlying technology is and how is it different from virtual digital assets and what are the similarities. So let me come to you, Prashant. Let us start the conversation with just understanding these subtle differences because the response of the audience was a bit telling for us.
Thank you. Interesting question because what we see normally is that people confuse between what a Web3 is versus what a blockchain is versus what a cryptocurrency is. And essentially, Web3 is an umbrella word for a lot of things which essentially will allow the internet to be read, write, which is essentially Web 2, but be able to interact as well. That's what essentially Web 3 is. And the underlying technologies that make Web 3 a Web 3 includes blockchain, and blockchain runs on cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency essentially is one use case of what we can do with blockchain. Blockchain is the technology on which the cryptocurrency runs. What we have seen is people interchangeably use the word blockchain and cryptocurrency, which essentially makes us feel that cryptocurrency is blockchain and blockchain is cryptocurrency. But we should understand that blockchain is the technology which enables cryptocurrency, and cryptocurrency essentially is the way to transact on blockchain. Thank you.
Gaurav, I'll come to you at this point. As we see that there is a lot of hesitation, a lot of caution when people talk about cryptocurrencies, but as Prashant started by explaining that it's not representative of blockchains or of Web3. So how should we look at regulation of these areas, because we can't look at it holistically? So how should we approach the regulatory aspect of it?
Well, I think there are two things which are happening. I think there is a lot of excitement for Web 3.0, blockchain and crypto, but that is largely limited to the tech community, to a community that had a lot of time during COVID to speculate in online behavior, and people who have a lot of wealth and therefore are able to, invest a part of it in something as crypto. At the same time, while there's excitement amongst the tech community, and especially India being a tech ecosystem, there is a lot of ambivalence when it comes to regulators, because you have to understand that regulatory systems across the world differ. There are certain regulatory systems which move with time. If you look at the EU regulatory system, they are quite advanced. As there is some technological innovation, the EU would already be thinking about what's a regulatory design that works with them. But there's a regulatory culture, I would say, in India, which is to basically study what is suitable and what different models are, and then apply that learning in India and try to find an Indian model. And I think that's my broad answer to your question, that essentially the Indian regulatory ecosystem is just studying what different worlds are doing, what different parts of the world are doing, and therefore the emphasis by our government to say that let us reach a global consensus. Because we don't want to take the lead. We don't want to be the innovator. We rather follow and be slightly risk averse, because given the fact that we are also a population of 80 crore people, there is high level of financial illiteracy, and there has been a past of stock market manipulation. So we as a government, they prefer, our regulatory system prefers to be cautious rather than be innovative.
Indeed, it's no secret that the government has been cautious about cryptocurrencies. And given the fact that blockchains is an important part of this entire discussion, Gopal, let me come to you and understand, what should the government really do regulating this area? Because it's a double-edged sword. It has potential, it has the fallouts as well. What is a good regulatory approach in this, especially at a time when India has the opportunity of the G20 presidency?
Yeah, thank you. I think as the captain of G20, it's time to show regulatory leadership. And as we've seen from what everyone has said, this is a very innovative sector with fast-moving technology. So like a good recipe, I would say you need an innovative regulatory and policy framework which essentially provides the first principles, which stimulates innovation. And as recently as a few days back, there's been a notification by which the PMLA now will cover this area. So the balance, as you rightly said, is between giving a springboard for supportive and emphasizing on the word innovative policy, and yet looking at some of the issues which have troubled regulators. Second, time has come for one vision, one uniform global framework, because being borderless and seamless, it's time to build that consensus. And as the leader of the G20, and we've seen finance ministers and regulators from the world coming here, India offers the right turf for building that consensus. And unlike what somebody said in the past, I think Jay said that we are regulatory followers, but I think time has come to be the leader. As the Prime Minister says, make in India, made in India for the world. So uniformity and consistency for global businesses fueled by innovation will perhaps offer the stability that developers and innovators are looking at. And B, by having cooperation and building consensus, we would be able to deal with some of, brackets open, the harmful effects by having a uniform policy and having almost all financial regulators on board. I think that perhaps is the way forward.
It's the time to lead, indeed. Shalini, let me come to you at this point. What does the government think it can do to pave the way in this area? We know that a lot of discussions have happened. It's continued for so many years now, but still we haven't really reached a point of clarity. There's a lot of policy limbo. How do you think we can unshackle this and bring in a certain degree of clarity when it comes to governance and regulation?
Great, Neha, thank you for that question. I've been hearing all the others and almost heard almost everybody on the panel. Trust me, when I did my engineering, I was taught C, C++. When I came out, I realized all the jobs were in Java. People who learned Java came out to understand that it was Python. People who learned Python came out to Android. People who learned Android came out to AI. And so on and so forth. Technology is changing at the speed of lightning. You don't expect the politicians and the regulators to really understand that. So I would rather think that the onus for regulation lies in the hands of the innovators itself. And I just heard Prashantji talk about the transition of Web 2 to Web 3. Why do you think we want to transition from Web 2 to Web 3? And one of the words that I always hear is security, is safety, right? I know when I'm having a fight with my husband, the only other person who's listening is Mark Zuckerberg, right? When I'm Googling about the cheapest place to go and have a holiday in Goa, Google is throwing out cheaper than that hotels in Thailand. So we are not secure in the Web 2 world. So when we are moving towards transparency in Web 3, and if we are talking about transparency as innovators, this is the same transparency that we need to show to the regulations as well, to the regulators as well. And that is what is going to help. If you do not innovate together with the regulators, if you're not open, in today's times, the regulator does not understand that crypto is different from cryptocurrencies, is different from blockchain, is different from digital currency, is different from tokenization. And hence, it is important for the innovator itself to go back to the regulator to make him understand that this is the regulator. Until we, sitting on this side, on the regulator's side, do not understand, or if we are opaque towards the fact that what is the wallet, where is the money getting transferred to, as regulators, what do we want? As regulators, we just want two things. One, that anything or any technology should not be misused. And second, that it should be a fair playing ground for one and all. And that's exactly what we want. And I'm sure fair playing technocrats, innovators, companies, enterprises want exactly this. So what I feel is, rather than pointing that finger towards the regulator, it's time to look into us and say, okay, this is the regulating policy that we need. And that is something that I don't see in the current set of entrepreneurs that we see in blockchain or in the Web3 space. Everybody seems to be concentrated on cryptocurrency, and that is so speculative, so volatile, and across the globe, governments want to say to their own people, stay away from cryptocurrencies. But that doesn't mean that stay away from blockchain. That doesn't mean stay away from tokenization of assets. That doesn't even mean stay away from stable coins. And that should be said by the entrepreneur, which somehow I don't hear loud enough.
Indeed, Rama, self-regulation, regulation, conflict of regulators, overlap of regulations. Tell us a bit about this, Rama. I know that we were talking before this discussion, and these are some areas that you touched upon. How is this an impediment when it comes to actually embracing something as wonderful as Web3?
No, I would just like to add a comment to what she said. Ideally, the industry, particularly the tech industry, would love to have a self-regulated environment, but I don't think regulators always have a different viewpoint. And globally, across 100 countries that NASCOM members operate in, and in India, we are always spending a lot of our time dealing with regulators. Important point is to differentiate the Web 3.0 and the benefits that come right from, a very decentralized internet. Blockchain is one of them. And most importantly, moving away from a centralized federated identity systems to a very decentralized self-sovereign identity, putting the control back in the user. So that's the overall Web 3.0 ecosystem. There are a lot of benefits of crypto assets, right, which maybe in India and even across the world, even before we could really harness them, whether it is whatever that comes with blockchain, you know, completely revolutionizing cross-border payment ecosystem, putting the control in terms of access to new alternative modes of financing for, you know, the small and medium enterprises. Even before harnessing all those benefits, I think some of the unfortunate developments in collapse of, you know, the crypto exchanges or some market players or market actors, unfortunately now has created scaremongering among multilateral organizations and also regulators. What's happening now is even before we can harness the true potential of crypto assets, for example, the Financial Stability Board, or whether you talk about the new report that IMF launched, we are now moving towards how can we apply the AML or the, you know, the counter-terrorism financing, CTF, regulation to crypto assets. I think we need to first look at what can we enable as at a country level, global level, plus at an India level, where regulators can come together, finance ministers can come together and look at how can we harness the potential of crypto assets, and then look at what is the coordinated regulatory response. We cannot come up with an India level response for this because crypto assets are borderless, right? So we need to look at a coordinated regulatory response so that we do, you know, make sure that we assure investors we do not have obscene valuations that really created the jitters, the way some exchanges crashed. So we need a coordinated regulatory response. One thing that, you know, there is so much focus now on crypto assets leading to some, you know, monetary risks or financial stability risks. If we go down the path, I think we are going to miss the bus on leveraging these technologies. We do need to look at it. There also, whatever is being talked about, that crypto assets have this risk, this going to cause this financial stability risk, it's very anecdotal. We do not have enough evidence-based data to say what is the risk they're going to pose. Maybe G20 has this data forum, right, that data gaps initiative. It's now in its third phase, it's not the first one. On the climate side, I think the G20's data gaps initiative is doing a good thing to get that data back into the climate policy making. We could look at how can this data gaps initiative look at getting the crypto assets data back into the macroeconomic statistics. So I think we need these kind of positive measures rather than go down this path that crypto assets have a global financial risk and financial stabilities of the world and IMFs of the world trying to now move towards, you know, looking at crypto assets and tightening the noose around anti-money laundering or tightening the noose around, I think we are going to lose out on the innovative potential. So I do agree we need regulatory response, but we need to first harness the benefits of this and look at various regulators coming together. In India, I would say there is maximum regulatory ambiguity when it comes to crypto assets. Is it SEBI? Is it Payment Settlement Systems of RBI? Is it Consumer Protection Act people? Or is it the new Digital India Act and Ministry of IT? I think we need to resolve this. And I will pray to God that we do not come up with new laws under existing statutes. Because if you have new rules, they are always under the overall parent statute. So if you look at SCRA of SEBI or Payment Settlement Systems or Consumer, there is a parent statute, right? And they have a certain mandate and a charter. If we now look at regulating crypto assets under that statute, I think we are going to not really do justice to it. We should look at new regulations, and all the regulators who have a point of view or who should be looking at it, like Consumer Protection Act, better look at it, right? They should all come together and come up with a very coordinated response in India, and we need to collaborate with other global stakeholders including multilateral organizations like World Bank and IMF, who seem to be taking a little pessimistic stance around potential of crypto.
So Prashant, I know that you've been interacting with a lot of stakeholders and your firm has done in-depth study in this area. Tell us your key takeaways when you interact with these people. What are their main problems that they are facing? And also, as Rama just pointed out, that this entire conversation that seems to be taking a backseat because of just the crypto part of it, where it seems to be shadowing the entire ecosystem. So how do we tackle it? Tell us about what could be an ideal regulatory approach to this.
I think I agree with what Shweta said. The innovators have to lead the way in educating the governments what to go and what to do, what not to do. And essentially, we as humans understand with stories, we understand with use cases. So the community which is working on blockchain and cryptocurrencies and everything else, we should focus on creating use cases which can be easily understood by the businesses, which can be easily understood by the government. And those use cases or stories should be brought back to the government to understand how it is going to help businesses, how it is going to help the government really bring to life blockchain in the country, which can enable I would say better supply chain networks, better gas networks, better skill registry, better land registry, everything that is possible with blockchain. And once we show that and show how that can be enabled with the right regulations in play, if you do not like cryptocurrency, there is stablecoin available, which can be put to play, which can be completely controlled by the government. So once we bring this to life for the government to understand and really create regulations around that, then the opportunity for this to become real for us in India is higher. The opportunity that India has right now with G20 is within this year, whenever the summit will happen, we'll have all the 20 countries which cover 85% of the global GDP available for us to primarily lead the way in this legislation, really work back with IMF and steer in one direction what should be the legislation which all the G20 countries should follow. And that should be a partnership, public and private partnership, where the industry bodies and the government work hand in hand, creating use cases, creating business scenarios which can be enabled using this, and legislations around that. And then that really goes to the board, gets cleared as part of the G20, and we can progress further using Web3 technologies in India and elsewhere.
Gaurav, just to take this point forward, in your mind, what are some areas that can be looked upon when we look for consensus when it comes to regulations, when it comes to building a framework which is agreeable to member countries?
Well, you have to first understand where the government's mindset is. The government last year introduced a 1% TDS and a 30% tax, right? And they have not said anything substantive in the follow-up budget speech this year. So this is where the mindset of this current government is. Because I find that there is, not that I'm on this platform of yours, I'm not here as a government representative or as a government critic. I'm just here as someone who has worked with government, who has worked with different finance committees, with different tech committees, who is part of the Joint Committee on Data Protection, who regularly interacts with the regulators. So I understand the mindset. So I'm just here as an objective policy analyst and as a student, or as an analyst of Indian regulatory behavior. So there is a battle of extreme narratives which is happening. There is one narrative which you're hearing on the stage, which is, this is amazing, this will create lots of jobs, this will revolutionize, we are number one, we should be, right at the forefront of it. And if you speak to regulators, it's the complete opposite. They said this is the medium for tax evasion, this is the medium for money laundering, this is the medium for pornography, child pornography, this is the medium for guns trafficking. And I'm assuming that the clear answer does not lie in either of the two extremes. The answer lies somewhere in the middle. So clearly there is a narrative that the industry needs to fix, because no government, if a particular sector, tech, is being tagged with money laundering, terrorist financing, then no government is really going to be innovative or be at the forefront. So there's a lot for this ecosystem to itself get rid of this baggage of negativity that it has. Secondly, you know, all sovereign governments, when it comes to the function of currency, will clearly be hesitant and cautious when it comes to any function or technology related to currency which decentralizes power, which takes away from regulatory supervision of the central banks or the market regulators. Therefore, one thing that I do see as a positive, that this entire technology has jolted governments across the world to look at inefficiencies in their mainstream banking system and try to come up with responses to fill the loopholes. And therefore, you've seen governments across the world come up with, you know, central digital bank currencies, whether it's the euro, we're talking about here in India as well. And I think that's a fallout of the pressure and of the lacuna that is being pointed out by the crypto and the blockchain revolution. I'm quite excited to see where central digital bank currencies land up. I'm quite hopeful that the conversation would be advanced in the G20 discussions. I'm not quite so optimistic as to what our government's demand would be, because I hope that our government is not telling others that, you know, put a 1% TDS and increase. That could be the global consensus as well, or it could be for a ban. I mean, you know, let us say, I think all options are there. But going back to what, you know, you said, that, you know, look at where the government's priority is. Government's priority right now is in fixing education. Government's priority is in fixing health. Government's priority is in fixing agriculture. Government's priority is in fixing supply chain in MSME. Government's priority is in fixing livelihoods, sectors which are labor intensive. And therefore, where are the large, you know, case studies and successes that we can see of blockchain technology working with agriculture, with supply chain, with livelihood, with spices and commodities? And that's what we need to see, because you need to give the regulator confidence. This is such a black box that, you know, the Indian regulatory mindset needs a bit of confidence, because we are a country, we're a country, yes, but we are the size of a continent with states with different regulatory capacities. Not everybody has the regulatory capacity of Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu. There are regulatory capacities of the Northeast which you have to take into account. There are the regulatory capacities of hill states which you have taken into account. So you have to be mindful of the realities in which you operate. Therefore, I would say that in order to instill confidence, there has to be case studies of successful blockchain-based interventions with different state governments for Telangana, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Meghalaya, which shows the application of blockchain, whether it's in tourism and other sectors. And at the same time, I must say, I don't know if you'll go for a third round, but there has to be a lot more of these interactions. You also have to include people like me who are not such gung-ho people, because you have to convince me. And I'm on the milder side, right? So if you're just sitting in a bubble and say that nobody gets us, we have this, then you're not going to go anywhere. You have to reach out to the opposite side, figure out, what we can intervene, what we can work with, because I'm telling you, I'm giving you the very mild version of what regulators think of the crypto, of the entire ecosystem. But there again, the design principles that are there in Web 3.0, the design principles around decentralization, transparency, programming, the delays in our financial banking systems, those are all legitimate questions that crypto is asking. But and therefore there needs to be sandboxes of government and blockchain applications doing interesting work. And I feel that if the government sees 2 or 3 good case studies, they would be very quick in scaling it up. I think we are very good at scaling it up, but I've seen it in my own experience of working on the privacy bill. Where is the Data Protection Act? It's been 3 years. So don't expect a crypto regulation to come out anytime soon, guys, because we don't have a Data Protection Act as of now. So nonetheless, I think these are the kind of interactions that we need to do more of, and we need to find ways of, instead of pointing fingers at each other, we need to find ways of, instead of living in the extremes, to come up with in the middle, to see what India needs, to see what India has also done in other aspects of fintech, in other aspects of digital payments. We've got digital payments. Do we, therefore, is there a, let us not assume that outside of crypto, nothing else is happening in the digital payment system. There's a lot happening in the Indian digital payment system and fintech as well. So again, let us keep engaging with each other. And as I said, I'm for first and foremost, as a consumer, as a representative of Indian citizens, I'm much more confident in central banks coming up with digital currencies, and let us see how that works. Thanks.
Gopal, it's a good point to bring you in. You're an advocate. Neither of the extremes. Maybe you can help us find a middle ground in this area and understand that when there is no consensus with us here in the panel, how do we drive consensus at such an international level, at a global scale? How do we start? It's a sophisticated technology we are talking about. It's complex. It's evolving very fast, ever-changing. These are things we heard over the evening. But how do we come to a point where we can at least start thinking about building consensus in terms of a regulatory framework?
I'll just be repeating what Gaurav said, because that's really the key thing of having user cases or case studies. So the best way, they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So if you are saying, well, Web3 is good for education, health, governance, technology, the moment you put user cases out, people imbibe it. For example, when we had the e-commerce debate, a lot was said that with the Amazons of the world, the sort of MSMEs, SMEs, etc. will go. Then they started showing that, look, there were case studies that, look, we are both online and offline. So I think the key thing is people must see for themselves the real benefits, touchy-feely as we Indians are. And second, we are likely to come up with the Digital India Act. So it's very important that when you have a new law, it broadly provides a principle and framework for sectors like this. And precedence is what people look to in the world. So perhaps if India is the first to come out with a law, not necessarily on crypto, blockchain or Web3, but showcasing a new age legislative framework, that can perhaps be a starting point for discussion with other countries. And the fact that we're going to have, as we had for finance ministers and regulators come, I think having brainstorming discussions with something tangible on the table is the starting point to building consensus.
Shalini, you're smiling. So tell us, what are the challenges in doing this?
Okay. So in doing this is, see, one thing you need to be very clear. I think nobody on the panel or anybody on this platform has said that you do not need regulations, right? And nobody has thankfully said you don't need regulators. And everything needs to be regulated, right? Including everything in Web3. Why are we not talking about AI? I think my children are doing their homework on ChatGPT. If tomorrow ChatGPT decides to go around and tell them that Rahul Gandhi is going to be the Prime Minister in 2024, I think Gauravji is going to be very happy, but my children are going to be extremely surprised when Narendra Modi becomes the Prime Minister. So I think we need to regulate everything around Web3. Having said that, and because we all agree to that, one of the most important things that I have been again and again saying, this opaqueness, when we are talking about terrorism, when we are talking misusing of cryptocurrencies, where exactly does it come from? It comes from the opaqueness that is given by the innovators itself, by the entrepreneurs itself. When we are talking about shifting narratives, where did this narrative actually come through? This narrative of blockchain is primarily cryptocurrency. As soon as you talk about currency, one of the things that is important, settled in my head, is surety of value. You know, I'm talking about you know, it being a currency is a note. When RBI says that it's a 10 rupee or a 100 rupee note, I know that it is a legal tender. And hence came digital currencies, which are again part of legal tender. Hence, we are talking about, and that's where regulation should be focusing on, is stable coins. What we need to be talking about is tokenization of bank deposits. When we are talking about use cases, and that's why I feel that G20 is a very good platform, because if you actually look at SWIFT, how swiftly was SWIFT adopted across the system? Because today, we have the leadership in UPI. Today, you go to somebody who's selling vegetables on a thela, he will have this UPI system installed there. That is how India has adopted tech. And if we today take the leadership and say that even these SMEs will be able to accept money from cross-border, it is this cross-border global interoperability which is going to make blockchain acceptable. But for that fact, we definitely need to be talking about use cases. We need to be talking about tokenization of assets, trading tokenization of assets. But then the right protocols need to be shared to the regulators so that the regulators can actually regulate. See, when it's a bank and there is a fraud in there, you know the people that you go after. In a Web3 ecosystem, whom do you go after? Do you go after an algorithm? And that's exactly what regulators want. Regulators want accountability, and that accountability will come from the ecosystem itself and should come from the ecosystem. I think what fintech has done for inclusivity or inclusion, I think blockchain can do to the entire sustainability, green sustainability platform. We have taken up the Solar Alliance and we are taking leadership there. We can do exactly the same for carbon footprints, for sustainable solutions. But the entrepreneurs out there need to go ahead and work on this. They need to be talking programmable money. When we can say as regulators, okay, this is the digital currency, this is meant for charity, and you are going to use this for charity. When I see the complete transparency in that chain, that's when as a regulator, as somebody who's making sure that the play is fair for the country, is going to be satisfied. I see no reason why, though I agree to Ramaji and the entire set of associations, I still feel that there is a need. There might not be a red carpet, but trust me, there is no red tapeism in this government.
All right. Rama, last question. You've heard everyone. Against this backdrop, how do you think this entire ecosystem will pan out, given your experience, what we've been talking about all evening? What are your net takeaways, your expectations?
Yeah, I think, a couple of points that I do agree with all my panelists is, I think the industry ecosystem needs to be a lot more proactive in being responsible ecosystem providers, because I think a few negative examples across the world have obviously got regulatory attention. So I would say the industry ecosystem should now be proactive. I don't see any reason why they will not be, because the tech ecosystem across the world has always risen up to any challenge it has faced. For example, the way the internet companies cooperate with law enforcement in any investigations. I think this ecosystem also needs to come up. And in terms of use cases, I would say crypto assets are of various shapes. Unfortunately, the unbanked tokens, which had the maximum negative impact, is now, that's the brush with which we are painting all crypto assets. I think we should look at like security tokens. They have so many closed network use cases. Can we use security tokens in the metro systems of the country, right? It can be loyalty programs. Any of those, hospitality industry can look at security tokens. So I think we should now broad base the applications of tokens, and the industry should take that proactive step so that the negative regulatory attention against crypto assets is addressed upfront. It cannot be pushed under the carpet.
Can I just say one thing? I think there is a lot of pressure put on innovators to kind of, give the regulator some ideal design of regulation. But I disagree with that. I think innovators can do pilots, but innovators don't know regulations. And it's not part of their job profile. It's not their mandate to shareholders. At the same time, that's my pushback to regulators in India, that this is not going to be an isolation. There will be an entire gamut of future technologies across all sectors in which you will need to think quicker and come up with a design quicker. And therefore, regulators also need to have some kind of a regulatory sandbox where they look at future finance-based technologies, understanding the capacity and limitations of big regulatory bodies. You can have small regulatory institutions, I don't want to say the word think tanks, but just say there should be small regulations which are just looking at the future and looking at what would be India's regulatory response to whether it's the future of social media, the future of the marketplace, the future of currency, the future of media. I think that's what we need to be doing. I think there are fantastic people in our country who have tremendous experience of working within the Indian and international regulatory system, and we should be harnessing their talent more. Instead of them being on the board of some big finance company, they should be, the Indian government should absorb them and think about, the regulation of for the future, because essentially, why should we always keep looking to the EU, which will always design a law based on European realities? We have to look at from an Indian context, and therefore we need to have an Indian regulatory sandbox. That's my takeaway.
All right, we'll take a couple of questions. All right, sir, you can ask your question. Could someone give him a mic, please? So you can ask your question.
I'm Deepak Maheshwari. I've been in the tech policy for about 25 years now. So here the title is Making India Web3 Ready. My question is, what is being done and what should be done to make Web3 India ready? Thank you.
All right. Gaurav, you want to take the question?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Could you repeat the question?
What, the last part?
What should be done to make Web3 India ready?
What should be done to make Web3 India?
India ready. We are talking about making India ready for Web3. What should be done to make Web3 India ready?
I mean, as I said, then, my two points that I'm bringing forward is that there need to be more successful case studies of blockchain technology being used in different states of India to address and solve an issue, a policy challenge or a policy implementation challenge in a critical social sector field, whether it's agriculture, education, health or livelihood. Point A. Point B is that our regulators, instead of always being like, okay, let us see what's happening there, we need to not be caught off guard again. I think we've been totally caught off guard. We are way behind regulatory thinking on this. This is going to happen to us again and again because the pace of technology is changing. So we need to have a regulatory design institution and we need to fix that because we need to think of, this problem would occur in other cases as well. So the Indian regulatory ecosystem needs to come up. Now whether that role or that function would be fulfilled by a Niti Aayog, by various institutions within the different line ministries, I don't know. But there needs to be this, we need to capture this thinking somewhere. Whether it's white papers or I don't know,
I'll just add 2 lines here. For making Web3 India ready, the Web3 ecosystem needs to understand India and the challenges that India faces rather than just copying from the West or copying from Dubai or copying from wherever. What we need to understand is indirect benefit transfer was successful because hundreds and lakhs and thousands of people did not have a bank account in India. What you need to understand is still students do not get grants in India. These are the people who can look for getting direct benefit from somewhere across the ecosystem. And that can be funded as case studies for the Web3 world, for the blockchain use case. And when that happens with innovators, I think Web3 will become India ready. And it's very simple to do, we've discussed it, but what we need is people like you thinking about India.
All right, we have 2 more questions. We need to wrap the panel, so the last 2 questions. So you could ask your question.
I have a question actually.
All right,
That's why I
please,
have
go
the
ahead.
mic. Yeah. No, firstly, really interesting panel. My name is Vatsal Gaur. I'm actually in the blockchain space, run a development studio. I also run a metaverse studio. And I'm a lawyer, so I wear 2-3 hats. What is India's position now that we have the presidency at G20? Just today, SWIFT announced a pilot that they've already done using inter-CBDC rails. So multiple countries CBDC, there's already a pilot that's been done where there's interoperability between CBDCs. India was one of the first countries to actually do the retail CBDC, and I'm someone who's always been very in favor of the regulations that RBI and Ministry of Finance place. Just today there was news about Silicon Valley Bank in the US going bust, and that just shows how supreme India's regulations are. What I was wondering is, do we have any roadmap for letting CBDC becoming more innovative and allowing private sector to innovate on top of CBDC? One of my dreams is to bring a lot of foreign NRI money back into India by token wrapping CBDC and allowing some sort of an amnesty scheme like what Mr. Narendra Modi had done earlier, a couple of years back, and allow for investment into Indian assets. Let them invest in real estate, in the government e-marketplace. So is it possible that CBDC will allow innovation to private companies like us who are built in India, will stay in India, are not running away to any Dubai, and we want to sincerely work with the government? So is that possible?
Sure. Rama, do you want to take that?
I think right now it's very early stage to see what is the long-term roadmap of RBI for CBDC in India, because right now I think it's almost like even the retail one is like a closed user group. They've decided which banks are going to be the partner organizations. They've not yet opened up. So I would say it's very early stage to predict what's likely to be the roadmap. But once the closed user group kind of a pilot scales up, there is no way that they cannot allow the private other market players to participate in that. Right now, I think that opportunity is not there. But I think we need to wait and see how this scales up, both the interbank one and the retail one.
I think what you're saying is the next step to CBDC, because what we are having is a retail pilot and an interbank pilot, and when this pilot will become successful, perhaps end of this year, the next step is what you were saying. Essentially, for this to grow and become useful for the country, the next step is what you're asking for. So that's a logical next step. So I think it will come automatically as time passes and we see a successful CBDC.
All right.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, that's the last question. We need to wrap.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I'm a journalist, so I'll keep it very short. It's a simple question. There are politicians sitting out here. There are people who work in Parliament. There is a responsibility of Parliament to basically make sure that regulation moves ahead. All right? And we've been asking for regulation for the last 2.5 hours, 3 hours for clarity. I want to ask the Congress representative and the BJP representative, what is it that their parties and particularly their leaders have done to make sure that regulation actually moves forward, keeping in mind the fact that this country of 1.4 billion people actually has many more priorities that are more important. How do you put crypto on the list of the top 5 priorities?
You're very right to say that there is an entire list of priorities in the digital space that is pending. Something that we've been involved with is, and when I say we, as in my party, because you refer to my party, something that we've been involved with is the Data Protection Act. Because ever since the Puttaswamy judgment, we've been harping that we need the law around data protection and privacy. We've been the bill when it was brought to the parliament did not go to the IT committee. It went to a joint parliament committee of which I was a member. I've seen 2 chairpersons change. We put forward our recommendations and the bill in its original form has been withdrawn. We're looking forward to see what this new bill is, but it has not been introduced in Parliament as of now. So if you ask me in the digital space where the priority is, because privacy is a fundamental right, we're putting that right at the top of our ask from the government. Secondly, we are seeing a massive, abuse of surveillance powers. I think our surveillance powers are antique. They relate to the old telegraph laws of many decades old, and they are not in line with the current standards. So I think in terms of surveillance laws, there needs to be a greater reform. That's something that our party has always been focused upon. And when it comes to currency, I think, as I said, we put a lot of emphasis on regulators because we believe that in the power of Indian institutions. We are not here to lambast Indian institutions. We are not here to deride Indian regulatory institutions. We are here to give more power to Indian regulators, to more autonomy. And I think if SEBI and RBI, who are 2 very critical regulatory institutions, if they are given more power, I think they will be able to come up with the draft design of what India's law needs to be. There's nothing that stops. And I've said this to RBI in our unofficial finance committee related meetings, that nothing stops the RBI from doing wide round of consultations and having a white paper to see what a possible India in Web 3.0 in the fin space could look like. There's nothing that stops the SEBI from doing this kind of brainstorming, because we need to have a template to refer to when and if this government does come to it. Thank you.
So your question was pinpointed, and I think the answer will be pinpointed. You've asked me, I represent a party that is headed by Shri Narendra Modi, who believes in the idea of digital India, who paved the way for digital India. Technology, we feel, is the backbone of every use case. So whatever you see, every ministry that you see, every scheme that you see, you actually use technology to bring in transparency. And that's how important and prioritized Web3 for us is. Because we feel that moving forward, privacy, safety, security is going to be the backbone, and hence Web3 is going to be the backbone moving further. Having said that, as the Constitution in India says, that justice can be delayed, but injustice should not be served. The regulators are a tad more careful in ensuring that wrong regulations or extremely tight regulations are not made not having understood the ecosystem. And that's one of the reasons why we are open, our doors are open, we are understanding the space, and so are the regulators. So that's a positive sign. That is a sign of priorities and prioritization. Thank you. Thanks for that question.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being so attentive. Prashant, Gaurav, Gopal, Shalini, Rama, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your views. Thank you.
Well, before you guys leave, a photo up. Thank you so much to all our panelists here for this extremely informative and insightful discussion. Surely ending the night on the right note. Well, that brings us to the end of the Delhi chapter of Namaste Web3. While the Delhi chapter concludes, our journey continues. We'd like to invite you to join the Namaste Web3 movement we have created a Telegram channel where we will keep the dialogue on and will also keep updating you of our subsequent chapters. Please do scan the code and join us. A big thank you to all of you for being a wonderful audience here this evening. Thank you and take care. Do join us for cocktails and dinner.